Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The mayor has called the first budget hearing to order. Mayor Davey.
Here.
Councilmember Laredo.
Here.
Councilmember London.
Here.
Councilmember McCormick. Here. Vice Mayor Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
Councilmember Segurola.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we do have a quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item, Mr. Mayor, is brief comments by council.
Right. I hope everybody had a nice Labor Day weekend. As I understand it, to just very briefly, the COVID numbers do seem to have gone down. Apparently the positivity rate here in Miami-Dade County is under 7%. We were looking for 5, but we got to under 7. Hopefully we will not see an increase or a spike because of the Labor Day weekend. That said, we've got to keep doing what we've been doing, which is facial covering, social distancing, washing our hands thoroughly and often. And also want to remind everybody, 2020census.gov. We need people to respond. Our response rate as a village has been less than optimal. Last report, we were at 52.5% response rate. We need everybody who resides in the key, either renters or owners, to respond to the census. You go to 2020census.gov and get it in. Those numbers help to determine our population for purposes of federal and state funding. And it's really critical that we get the community out there to do their part and take part in the census. 5 to 7 minutes, that's all it takes, and you'll be done. So that's it for now. Also, we got 2 little storms out there in the Atlantic. So I just advise everybody, just keep your eye on the tropics for now. Anybody else? Okay.
The next item, Mr. Mayor, is public comments.
Right. Peter, if you want to make sure everybody understands, state their name, their address, if they're a hired consultant or village employee, or if they are engaged in lobbying activities and or represent an organization, please state so for the record. They'll have 3 minutes.
All right, Mr. Mayor. Councilman?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't jump in fast enough. Can we start just 2 seconds I understand the process? What are we trying to, this is first budget hearing. What does that mean? Are we going to make decisions today? What is the administration's the mayor's wish today? The final budget will be approved on the 22nd, correct?
Through the chair, may I respond?
Certainly.
Thank you, Councilman Laredo. So the game plan is I have about a 5-minute opening presentation, and then I was going to turn it over to the council. We are prepared to go line item by line item should the council desire. However, I think at this point, the council is very well prepared, and you guys have spent a lot of time with me and with the staff working on gaining an understanding. So my hope is that we can focus on those items that we can take action on and decisions on, and then we'll take any direction
the short answer, Mayor, Madam Manager, just for the purposes of time, is that we are gonna, or we could vote today on items as we go along, and then a second reading of a full budget in 2 weeks from now. Correct?
So through the chair, that would be my goal, is as many decisions as we can address as we can.
Councilmember Laredo, the answer is yes. You have to adopt a tentative millage and a tentative budget tonight. The final budget and final millage will be on the 22nd, but you will be taking formal action.
What is the motion that the millage that we approved last time?
Didn't approve the millage. We directed, I'm sorry, I'm stepping out of hand.
This way it helps Mayor as the people who are going to make comments to understand.
Okay.
We approved 3.2187. Did we not?
We directed the manager to submit that as the trim notice millage. Okay. We have not adopted nor have we made a motion to millage officially.
The next 2 other quick questions on procedure. what version I have, please forgive me if I make dumb questions during the go, because I have like 17 versions of the budget. That's usually got it late, the last version. I've asked over the last few months on at least 3 occasions if I could hold on to the original budget book, and that the answer came back that that was going to be fundamentally what we have, and that is the book that I have now, and try to print desperately something that came in. So the short answer that I would like is which version exactly are we working off? Because it's versions flying off from all over the place. They're not labeled draft 1 and 2. So if I make a mistake, it's because I may be looking at the wrong documents.
So it's the version that the clerk's office issued, and it's the version that's posted online.
Unfortunately, as you know, I am not today currently in Miami, and obviously that was delivered, and of course I'm not there to pick it up.
Oh.
So exactly. Well, but you all knew that I was going to. Be as it may, we'll work through. I mean, I have a version that you sent with an email back in the 27th of August. Is that the same version, or is this another version?
No, I've tried to keep everybody informed as we've made changes. Perhaps if you have access to internet, can you pull up the agenda?
This is such a simple thing to arrange. I mean, it keeps putting the burden of work on us who are doing volunteer work. But I'm not going to beat on a dead horse. It's getting very frustrating. Getting things at the last minute, getting the wrong drafts. So anyway, my fellow colleagues, the council, if I make a mistake, it's because I have no idea if we're working off the same document, but I'll do the best we can.
Understood. And certainly we'll be going through this budget and we'll have another meeting on it as well. So yeah, I take your point, and let's see what we can do tonight.
Okay.
And Mayor, as it relates to public comments, we will have a public hearing on the millage and budget. So
Right.
If members of the public want to wait to speak on those items, it would be appropriate at that time.
Or they can speak now, and they can forego the other one if they choose. Up to them. But they will, you're right, they'll have a chance to speak to the millage as well as to the budget. Okay.
Mike, I had my hand up earlier. I don't
I'm
think you
sorry,
saw me, but that's
I did
okay.
not.
But just before we go, I had one thing I wanted to tag on to your plea for the census, that it's important if you reside in the village of Key Biscayne, citizen, not citizen, if you live here, you fill out the census. Is that right?
Right. Yes, that's correct. I apologize. Anybody who resides in the village of Key Biscayne should be filling out the census. Also, I would be remiss, 3 days.
Okay, and
I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say 3 days from now is, of course, the anniversary of 9/11. So I think we should all remember that. It's 19 years since that day.
Okay, and the other thing that I wanted to say, and I may have been the only one of the 7 of us who needed this, but when I sat down to reflect on the documents we have and the notes that I've taken over the past few weeks, it was important for me to remind myself to focus my discussion tonight on the budget before us and not things that we'll be discussing in executive session for the labor negotiations, because there's some overlap in things, and it was important for me to remind myself. So it may help someone else. I'm going to throw it out there.
Noted. Thank you. Anybody else before we go to public comments now? All right. Peter, our first caller.
All right, Mr. Mayor, first caller is telephone number ending in 298. Again, that is telephone number 298.
And again, you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, caller, if you just press *6 now, you should be able to unmute yourself. Again, that is telephone number 298. Caller, please press *6. Telephone number 298. Press *6 to unmute yourself now.
You want to go to somebody else and maybe they'll come back?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you do wish to speak or have any questions for council, please press *9 on your telephones now. And for those of you watching at home or streaming online, the number to call is 305-365.
Yeah, 298 has joined the
Yep,
game.
there we go.
Yeah, 298 has.
Okay, go ahead.
Telephone number 298. Press *6 to unmute yourself now.
I did.
Sir, you are live.
You want to go to somebody else and maybe they'll come back?
Ladies and gentlemen, if you do wish to speak or have any questions for council, please press *9.
Sir, you're live.
For those of
Okay.
All right, Mr. Mayor, I don't have anyone else right now wishing to speak.
All right, but 298 wanted to speak and he just muted himself. All right, well, let's give him another second. You want to try and ask him to unmute himself? I wish the system was.
Caller, if you wish to unmute yourself, please press *6. Again, 298. If you wish to unmute yourself, press *6 now. All right, Mr. Mayor, we do have 2 other people lined up.
No, hold on, Pete. He's unmuted himself. Go ahead, 298.
Hello, Mike?
Yes,
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
All right, Mr. Mayor,
you are. Turn down your volume on your TV, please.
I don't have a TV on.
Oh, you don't? The computer.
Okay. I'll turn down my volume if I can find it.
Caller, if you wish to unmute yourself, please press *6. Again, 298. If you wish to unmute yourself, press *6.
Here I am.
All right,
Can I start?
please.
All right. My name is Donald Ellisberg. I live at 177 Ocean Lane Drive, Unit 1111. I am not affiliated with any lobbying or any other such organization, and I am here speaking solely for myself. I
Begin.
want to make several points about the budget, particularly on the public safety issues. The problem is that when you look at what's going on, even with the limited budget changes that you have so far, before you have anything else, you have all engaged, regrettably, in defunding the public safety agencies, which has been a no-no in connection with much of the public safety around this country, and certainly with respect to COVID and the various demonstrations. Our police and fire department has spent the last 6 months or so giving themselves a very, very extensive exposure to the COVID activities, notwithstanding the police chief catching it himself. And we have many of these officers have been in working with other agencies on the demonstrations, both the demonstrations downtown and keeping the demonstrators off of Key Biscayne. And it seems to me that you have to look at the timing for what you want to do, even if it were commendable, and I don't think it is. But even if it were commendable, you're leaving yourself open for a hell of a criticism. What's this wonderful town of Key Biscayne doing, being contrarian to everybody else practically in the United States? So I just wanted to point out that sometimes you want to talk about proposals as money, and sometimes you need to understand proposals as political issues. And of course, one of the problems that you have is this budget was worked over by the village manager for whatever that's worth. But we also know that there are other people who want to also do some more, quote, trimming and cutting. And in my view, that is simply another form of defunding. So I'd like to at least point out, with all due respect to everyone, that that really is not appropriate at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
All right, Mr. Mayor, our next caller is telephone number ending in 607. Again, that is telephone number 607. Press star 6 on caller, you are live.
Good evening. This is Myra Lindsay, 365 Westwood Drive. Good evening, council, mayor, staff. I'm calling regarding a couple of issues on the budget. One of them is more of a policy issue regarding COVID and how you all will be addressing group programming and events, as well as travel and training for staff and council. I'm sure you are aware that in many municipalities, as well as in businesses and in professions, travel and training have been put on hold for the next year. And so you may want to consider that as a public policy issue that you will kind of have to address today because of budget reasons. But also you have a situation with group programming and events, and we certainly don't want to go back and undo all the progress that we've achieved here as community with COVID spread. So please consider that in how you legislate through budgeting to to manage these type of events in the next year until a vaccine is out. My second issue is to please consider what's going on in our state. Our state is losing approximately $700 million a day in lost revenue through travel, through and through the loss of sales tax. And so we are going to hit a rough spot. We do have a situation where the county and other municipalities, so Miami-Dade County is trying to work and trying to get the attention of the state legislators because they anticipate that there will be a large number of people who will be unable to pay their property taxes this year. They don't want them penalized, but they want to see what options will be offered. So just a heads up, and please consider that during your budgeting process. And the last issue has to do with our department and the increase of administrative assistance and functions. And when it comes to police and fire, please make a distinction between administrative functions and redundancies and efficiencies and public safety. I think we all agree the public safety, the level of public safety should not be touched at all. However, we need to consider that in all professions and in all businesses and in all walks of life, we have done away with administrative assistance. In the case of the legal profession, 30 years ago, you used to have an administrative assistant for every 2 lawyers. Now, most firms do not have administrative assistants that are attached to lawyers because everything has become, automated and is online. In the
Mayor, I'm
case
going to have
of
to
our
ask you
department-
to wrap it up. I'm sorry.
Okay, and just
Mr.
you're
Roberts,
paying for licensing. People so please consider just efficiencies and cutting or just addressing administrative assistance and not increasing those positions. Thank you all for your work.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor, we do have one more caller. Telephone number ending in 493. Again, that is telephone ending in 493. Please press star 6.
There we go.
Caller, you are live.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, good evening, council. This is Ceci Sanchez, 260 Cypress Drive. As a chair of the Village Beautification Board, I am calling to register a protest of not being included in budget goals and priorities by village staff and I ask why 5 well-meaning residents keep being left in the dark. I hope to get an answer, and I hope things will change. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Mayor. I do not see any other people wishing to speak at the moment.
Okay, let's close public comment.
Before we do that, could Pete just give the number again and the instructions, because there is a delay.
Fair enough.
No problem.
I
All
was
right,
just-
ladies and
We're gonna have 2 more items, but you're right. That's absolutely fine.
ladies and gentlemen watching at home, if you do have a question for council or just wish to make a comment, please dial 305-365-7569. Then enter meeting ID number 231-627-8415. If you are in the meeting currently and wish to speak, please dial *9 on your telephone now.
Mayor, as an enlargement of that point, and I know we have all these rules, et cetera, but if we can be extra flexible during the period of this evening from the chair to allow people, if they call in late and confused, because as you know, people
Right.
are having trouble.
No, I agree with you. I think
So
we've got,
be flexible, yeah.
with some
I know you
latitude,
are.
I agree. Our residents need some
Okay.
flexibility. Absolutely. I don't have a problem.
Yeah, so when Pete sees that he's got 7 or 8 calls, maybe he can alert you and
Right.
we
That's
can
fine.
break the,
Will do. Currently, we don't have anybody lined up to speak as of yet.
Let's go to the next item.
The next item, Mr. Mayor, is a millage resolution of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, adopting the proposed millage rate of the Village of Key Biscayne for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021, pursuant to Florida Statute 200.065 Trim Bill, setting a date for a final virtual public hearing to adopt the millage rate, providing for an effective date.
I'll move it.
I move to table it.
Well, we need a second first.
Second.
Okay.
I make a motion to table it.
I'll second your motion to table it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Good.
The next item, Mr. Mayor, is the first reading of an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, adopting the budgets for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021, pursuant to Section 200.065 Florida Statutes Trim Bill and providing for an effective date.
Move.
Second.
Okay,
Thank
I'll
you.
open it to public comments. Pete, do we have anybody?
Not at the moment, sir.
Okay. As Councilmember Laredo suggested, I think if we do get a number of people who raise their hands, I don't want them one-offs, but I think if you see that there's a number of people who are asking to speak, let's let them speak at some point, unless, we get too late into the evening, but I'd like to see them have their opportunities.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Madam Manager? Madam Manager? Okay.
All right. Good evening. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here for a brief intro. Pete, do you see my screen?
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Yep.
Okay, great. So good evening, Mayor, council members, residents, everybody, businesses. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, staff, for all the hard work that you've done. This is quite a remarkable work product, and it's taken a lot of our time and energy, and we're thankful for where we are now, and we look forward to this evening and the feedback we get from council. So briefly, what I am going to go through. So we're going to talk a little bit about property value. This is no more than 5-10 minutes. Just talk about our property values, where our millage rate is, a few changes to the structure of the budget that I think are important to point out, where we are with our fund balances, and also a snapshot of the general fund, and then a reflection on our strategic priorities. So generally, as values go up, really the millage rates, right, the tax rate goes down. And the inverse is also true. Despite 3 years of declining property values, as you can see on this slide, and losses in revenue due to COVID-19 and other challenges that the entire globe faces, really, based on the direction of council, we were to come in at or below the rollback rate, and we did that. And we are not proposing a tax increase. We are proposing a millage rate that generates less income, is lower than what we originally noticed in the beginning of the summer, and residents are still going to get the same or better services. And we've been able to cut about $2 million off the budget. So compared to our neighboring cities within Miami-Dade County, our residents pay the lowest total millage rate in the county, which includes, cities, our next two competitors here are Belle Harbor and Aventura, that also have quite high property values. So keep that in mind as we move forward. High level, basically our revenue based on the fiscal 21 proposed budget is about 34.25 million, of which about 33 2/3 are our operating expenditures. We do include $250,000 in a transfer to our land trust fund for land acquisition. And we've also been able to, even at this low millage rate, establish a reserve policy for compensated absences to be able to take care of the employees who are going to be retiring or leaving within the next 3 to 7 years or so. The millage rate as proposed before you is 3.2164. So for a sense of scale, if you have a taxable value of $1 million in your property, your village taxes would be $3,216. So a few changes to the structure of the budget. One thing you may notice is the object codes. So within each budget, we've simplified and standardized those codes so that every time you pick, professional services, we have more integrity in our reporting and you have consistency across the departments for what goes in each line item. We also broke out the council advisory board and community groups. That was the direction we received from council. So you'll see that. I will point out in fiscal 19 actuals, education advisory board, I think there might be a change that we need to correct for second reading on in fiscal 19 actual, actually in the manager's budget under educational incentives. So we'll fix that. We've also eliminated the red light camera revenues and expenditures from the budget. It really is, it's a net neutral cost to the village, and it's a pass through to the state. So we took that out both on the revenue side and the expenditure side. We've analyzed our cost allocations and correctly allocated costs by department. So that includes things like our IT infrastructure, as well as our cost of our utilities, for example. And we've also, in addition to increasing the compensated absence reserve with this budget, we've also moved it to sort of a below the line item, which is budgeted. So we know how much money we are putting aside for the reserve, but I wanted to point out that it is not an operating expense. So that's a significant change that you'll see in some of the budgets. Their operating expense only covers the leave accruals that people are entitled to in the current year. So fund balances, high level. In the general fund, we have an available balance of about $6 million in working capital. There are about $9 million worth of other funds in our fund balance that have some type of restriction or commitment on them. In our transportation fund, we have about a $2 million balance. And then in our land trust fund, we have about a $3.5 million beginning balance. And the reason why we note beginning, this exercise is done as part of our audit, and it's in our CAFR, our comprehensive annual financial report. So these are the numbers as of the beginning of the year. During our briefing, some council members have requested a more in-depth and current analysis of our fund balances. So we can speak to it this evening, and we'll be sure for the next hearing, we will include more details on our fund balance reserves. So strategic priorities in this budget, you will see that we are dedicating energy to resilience and sustainability for the long-term survival of our island. And how are we doing that? So in part, we're looking at reducing and reusing. And it's not just our environmental footprint, but we wanted to focus on, there are legislative actions like the fertilizer ordinance and irrigation limitations and climate emergency that the council has put forth. And we also, on the operations side, we're getting everybody off septic. We're trying to introduce electric car charging stations. We're trying to compost seaweed. We are conserving water. We are also looking at reuse of purple, we call them the purple lines, which is underground infrastructure we have to be able to reuse some of our precious water resources. This concept also applies for personnel. So the idea of getting the most out of the talent that we have. So we're cross-training staff members, we're investing in professional development and also automation of business processes, which should reduce our process time, simplify things, and make us more effective with less resources, or at least the existing resources that we have. With regard to code amendments and code compliance, this is something that is important from a legislative and a budgetary perspective. We really improve on our code compliance and the community's understanding of what our codes are, and then also the enforcement and compliance with that. So some of the things that we're doing is the zoning code amendments that'll focus on first single family homes, then multifamily homes, on how we can build to a higher standard and be more sustainable and resilient in our building. And then again, this applies to our personnel, right? So we're proposing in this budget to in-house our code compliance officer, which would save money in the long run and give the village additional control over our compliance efforts. And we got the authorization, and I thank the council for doing that, to move forward with the horticulturalist and the arborist. And we would rely on that individual to also help us with the compliance on what we're calling, the green compliance, so on the landscaping and the beautification of the island. We also are investing in a communications officer, which we've been talking about for a long time. And that individual will be focusing on working with each of the departments, including our resilience, folks that are working on resilience, for the awareness campaigns to help us improve our compliance. We really have tried to establish ourselves as a breeding ground for pilot programs for new technologies to address things like beach management, traffic congestion and multimodality, as well as the health of our beach and the quality of our water. With regard to public safety, which is another pillar of our strategic initiatives, a few things that we've done. So you may not think of it this way, but we had a very talented permit clerk who became a certified floodplain manager. And as a result, not only are we more resilient, but we're also going to be safer because we have better capabilities in-house to address some of our flooding. And then given global pandemics like COVID-19 and ongoing threats of hurricanes, previously the village relied so heavily on one of our departments, and I thank you to the fire department for having built up this ICS structure. And I think given the challenges we've had, we've been able to widely train many staff members on how to use the incident command structure. And I think that has made us a safer community as a result. We'll also, less reliant on using some overtime to be able to deliver these core functions because more of us are trained who are not eligible for overtime. We're also taking control over some of our challenges with regard to access, which is a tremendous issue for the village. So in particular, I'd like to thank Chief Press Traffic Disruption Management Plan for the Rickenbacker Causeway. So working segment by segment to be able to open the causeway more quickly in the event of an accident on the causeway. And also things like in the fire department, I'd like to thank Chief Lang, the comprehensive emergency management plan update. We've been working with the county and other stakeholders to ensure that, God forbid, there's a catastrophic failure of Bear Cut Bridge, that we can deploy a pontoon bridge and gain access to the island as quickly as possible. And I'd also like to thank the fire department for integrating lessons learned through COVID-19, which wasn't contemplated as a 9-month, crisis, and that's something we've all learned from and enhances our public safety capabilities. We're also focusing on quality of life, so we'll have Sands on the Beach in 21. I'd like to thank Dr. Samimi and Jay Gossaman and the team at Moffitt and Nickel for putting that forth. Reducing flooding, investing in our parks. Harbor Park is one of our newest assets, and we're thrilled to have that resource available to us, and we think it'll improve quality of life tremendously. And also, we've tried to do virtual programming and really establish a safe reopening as we recover from COVID-19 and the impacts it has had on us. And also, we're going to be enhancing our landscaping. And to address Ms. Sanchez's comments, I'm sorry to hear that you don't feel involved. I feel as though you and I have personally been involved, and we will keep it up and continue to do better to make sure that you and the folks you're referring to are engaged and here alongside with us. So the fourth pillar of our strategic plan is, good governance and efficiency. I think I commend the mayor for, at our last meeting, bringing up the idea of following Robert's Rules of Order. I think that'll be great for the village. At the council direction, we've eliminated services like our lobbyists and relying more heavily on internal resources, the council members, yourselves, plus myself and our staff. We're improving customer service. We plan on launching a 311 call center. We've gone live with the permitting system, and electronic plan review is coming soon. We're working in this budget. You'll see mechanisms to improve our collection for solid waste. And we've also launched a grant program that in the first year here, we have about $30 million of grant funding underway. Although increases to personnel costs have impacted the village, I think that which is within my control, we've cut almost $800,000. So in the budget message on pages 6 and 7, by tactics such as freezing vacancies, leveraging technologies, cross-training personnel, properly enforcing the collective bargaining agreements, reducing overtime. That saved us just shy of $500,000. And then we've also just shy of $300,000 by being less reliant on contracted services, such as, backfill for positions when folks are out of the office. And, FA services is something that the council recently awarded. So with all of that, we improve our transparency and our financial stability, and we've cut costs and we've preserved our level of service. And finally, I think the key message here for the 2021 Key Biscayne budget is that we've reduced the size of government. We're reducing spending by over $2 million, which is about 6%, while enhancing resilience and quality of life and preserving public safety. So that is our introduction. And Mayor, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay. What I thought we would do is start off. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. So I thought I would start let me call on Councilmember Segurola. You're next to me in the video. Why don't you start with your questions?
I don't really have that many questions. I just have observations and opinions on what we should do with the budget. I am very glad to see it going down going down as opposed to going up. If you'd like, I could just go down the list of notes that I've made regarding my thoughts on the budget. Yeah. First and foremost, I'd like with regard to the object identifier number, travel, what's 40.000. Across the budget, all departments, I see the current situation extending for many months. I don't see it coming to a close anytime soon. I see it affecting every aspect of life, at least into the beginning of the new year. I propose that we cut the travel budgets of every department across the entire village at least by 50%. Everything is going to Zoom. So I just don't see department heads and employees traveling all that much. Similarly, there are several departments that have training budgets under object item 55.100. assume that some of those are for registration fees for various, symposiums and conventions and whatever may come that way. I think that I would ask every department to reanalyze that line item and come back with a lower number. I wouldn't say 50% because it's not as clear cut as travel to me, but any convention that's going to be switched over to Zoom, the registration fee, it will be pretty much the only cost. There won't be any other associated travel expense if that's included in training. So I think that's a number we can bring down. Let's see, what else? Extensive numbers. There was one item on the budget that I discussed with the manager earlier today that I believe she told me was mislabeled, will be cleared up for the next hearing. I believe that is item number 538.72110. It is listed as a resiliency bond interest expense of $615,802. She clarified that that has nothing to do with the resiliency bond. That is, in fact, with the stormwater. Now, we also have a placeholder in the budget. We're holding a line item of $1 million for the library. I believe we can wipe that out. I don't think we need to have that placeholder. Basically, the library belongs to the county, number one. And number two, that is completely stopped in litigation, which I don't think is going to be resolved anytime soon. And I don't really see any action being taken on the library in the next fiscal year. After that, let's see. There are certain line items. I'll start with fire. And I'll go by the page numbers on the PDF copy that I received. I don't use physical copies. I just use the PDF copies. But fire has a line item for training on page 258 of the PDF for $24,500 without any further details. I don't feel comfortable just awarding that number just on a straight request without any further information. Same thing they have on page 259, a tuition reimbursal for $30,000, but it doesn't really say what for. Similarly, on page 244, they have a travel request for $27,840. The police department has similar line items that I would request be itemized better and reduced. And then after that, I would again ask this council to reconsider, number one, painting the bike lanes green. I don't think we need it, and I definitely don't think we need it in this calendar year, and especially when we're going to be paying to improve a road that does not belong to us, belongs to the county. That's $200,000 right there we can save. And I would also ask the council to reconsider the hiring.
Respectfully, these things have been voted on, and Chad, you can stop.
I understand that they've been voted on, but I understand they've been voted on. I'm saying not fund them as part of the budget. So yes, we voted on, they passed. What I'm saying is don't fund it. Same thing with the city planner that was hired at the behest of the 2040 for $165,000. I think we can do without that for this next fiscal year.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Councilmember. I know your point. I just want to be clear on how we proceed. If this is this proper? Is he?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's proper to the extent the green bike lanes. I don't know this. I mean, we did sign an agreement with the state. I don't know what.
No, that's fine. But he can speak to the bond. I just don't want us. Follow the rules. So
yeah, I think
it's been voted on. He's asking for reconsideration.
No, I'm not asking for reconsideration. I'm asking to not fund.
Remove the numbers from the budgets. Okay,
correct.
That's it. Okay, is that okay? I mean, I'm going to you, Chad, for ruling on the rules.
On what specific one? On the
the green bike lanes has been voted on by the council and approved.
Right.
I have to you is it appropriate for a council member to say I don't want to fund this budgetary item?
I think the council, again, I think on that item, the council has the discretion still to
Okay.
unfund it if they want.
That's
The only
fine. That's all.
caveat is we have an agreement with the state on that one, and we just
Well,
need to
right, but
check.
I want to be procedurally correct.
Correct.
Okay. And similarly for, as I was saying, for the 2040 master plan, the city planner for 165,000, I would say not fund that now also. Finally, the last category would be the community groups. There are several community groups that I believe the funding should be reduced or eliminated altogether, given the fact of everything that we're going through. I'll give, oh, I'm sorry, one more thing, I'll just step back. There's a small line item for council travel in the budget for 11,300. I personally think, you know, we're not going to use 3/4 of that, but just for, in an overabundance of caution, I think we could drop that down to at least no more than $5,000, save ourselves 6,300. After that, okay, with regard to the community group specifically, Car Week, I don't think it should be funded, given the fact that with everything going on, it's just not going to take place. The Children's Business Fair, I'm sure it's a wonderful activity, but I just don't see that being appropriate now. The Piano Festival, I know that they reduced their request from 128,000 to 59,545. I believe that that's not something that we should be funding at this time at all. And a zero waste culture, the request was 15,410 for several reasons. Given the fact that that business is not really even located on Key Biscayne, I would say that we should reduce that funding down to zero. Let me see. There's also some questions, actually some questions I do have. There are separate funding requests for the youth council and for the youth leadership. And I guess my question regarding that is, is there any overlap? Why are there two separate funding requests when it would seem to me that they would be basically doing very similar, if not the same thing. The manager in her budget, she had a grants consultant for $15,000. In the past, I believe the last time around that we applied for a grant, Todd handled it when it was for the park, the next to last park that we purchased, that we received $800,000 from the state. So that's $15,000 that I think we might be able to reduce there. And then for the Education Advisory Board, there's a request for $57,000. But then also separately, there's another line item somewhere else in the budget for $35,000 for the address verification. In between the two, we're talking over $90,000. Number one, I'm not sure if according to our charter, a village advisory board is allowed to just be given a chunk of money to decide how to spend it. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. But aside from that, I'm wondering what the overlap is between the Education Advisory Board and the address verification, if there is any. Let me see. And that's pretty much my notes for the time being on the current budget. I know it's a lot of stuff all over the place.
No, that's good. Manager, would you want to address those items?
I will do my best. I took some notes here. So I think with regard to travel and training, we will look at that and come back to the council on second reading with some reductions there. With regard to tuition reimbursement in particular, there are requirements pursuant to the collective bargaining agreement that we honor. So we'll double check to make sure we're only meeting our obligation. I believe that we are, but we can take a look at that. The green bike lanes, that's policy decision for the council. It is in there now based on the discussion and the last action the council took. On the community groups, again, I think that's a policy decision. I jotted down as many as I could. I think that's before the council for discussion. With regard to the grant consultant, so Todd has a guy. Todd has a guy for almost everything. So the grant that we secured for Hampton Park, we actually used the same the same support, the same resource. I will say that although you see the expenditure now, when we receive the grants, we'll program the revenues. And so the cost of the grant writer will be included in the grant. And I will tell you that he is excellent and worth his weight in gold. And he doesn't charge very much per grant, and he's got great connections. So I think it's a very, very valuable investment. And I think that the idea of, we don't want to double dip, and I agree. In lieu of having a staff member be a grant writer, basically what has been happening in practice, we'll have subject matter experts. So Todd, handles the parks, and Dr. Samimi handles some of the resilience grants we're pursuing, and Jake handles some of the grants, and the chiefs handle some of the grants in their respective shops. So we'll provide most of the content and the meat for the grants, but there is an art, if you will, to the grant writing. And so we do recommend including some funding for that, but it should pay for itself. If we get the 30 million we're pursuing, it'll pay for itself quite a few times over. With regard to EAB, so the Educational Advisory Board, and I tried to be pretty clear in the manager's memo, we agree that the boards don't have funding in of themselves. These are funds that perhaps, sit under the board's budget, but there's not really discretion. I think the same for the vision plan, the discretion of the board. These are funds that are set aside by council for a specific purpose and handled by administration in coordination with the board, but they don't have any expenditure authority. So,
and if I could, as the liaison, Mike, if it's okay if I jump in on that one?
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember, you're recognized.
You might remember from previous budgets that you approved, Ignacio, they work with the school principals collaboratively over the year to identify different expenditures that are priority for our community that are not funded otherwise. They're not funding things that the school district would fund if we didn't. And then those are submitted to the council, like you saw them at the budget workshop. They were included when we reviewed community groups. And that's how that money is approved. And then it goes through the manager's office. It's not a lump sum given to a board to decide how to use. It's approved ahead of time by us. And you'll notice it even fluctuates from year to year, so that it's not just here's a bunch of money, now decide how you want to spend it. And the difference, you asked also about the difference between that and address verification, is they're fully separate. One is educational initiatives and programming that wouldn't otherwise happen. And the address verification is just that. And we had discussed, if you recall, last year at the budget, that it was something we felt was good for a 3-year commitment. And this would be the third.
I have a question with regard to the funds, the 57,000 for the EAB. And correct me if I'm wrong, and I've been wrong many times, but when an invoice or an item or something is requested to be funded by the village on behalf of the school, what's the process for that invoice or that request? Because I don't recall seeing specific invoices or requests.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you would probably have to. The invoices come after the approval, right? So the appropriation is made now in the budgeting process, and what we got, I don't have it in front of me, but we get sort of line items of what the categories are or what the program is that they're going to be funded. And then when they need to actually purchase whatever the item is, that's when the invoice comes in for reimbursement. And I don't think everything was even spent last year. Is that right?
Where are those additional line items to be found, and do they come throughout the year?
No, you approve it at the beginning. You saw it at the budget, like the very first budget workshop.
Okay.
Right. So Councilmember McCormick, may I kind of supplement?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So in the Councilmember Cigarrola, in the community group, the first budget workshop, EAB provided all the breakdown of what the funding requests are and what purpose. When the budget gets approved, the village sends a letter to the school board and says that the village has funded this dollar amount for these reasons. And then at the end of the school year, we get the invoice that reflects everything that has taken place. So I can tell you in my experience here, last year, there was one line item where the principal called me, and I think it was like $2,000 or a couple $1,000 that they needed changed from one line item to the other. And I debated whether or not that was appropriate to bring back to council. At the time, you know, the manager's purchasing authority was much less, and I green lighted it because I felt it was in line with the intent. It was another category. So that's how that process works. And we'll take a note here. I can follow up with you and share with you the specific programs.
Yeah, that's what I was about to ask, if before the next hearing, I could get copies of those invoices showing, you know, tracking what the funding requests were.
Yeah, so we just get one submittal at the end of the year, but I can call out. So professional development, advanced academics, 2,500 for each the K-8 and Mass. Cambridge materials and supplies, 6,000 for Mass, 10,000 for the K-8. Technology components, 5,000 for Mass, 10,000 for the K-8. STEM supplies, 2,500 for Mass, 3,500 for the K-8. New student orientation, a personnel cost at Mast Academy for $10,000, and then also at Gables High, which is our theater school, extracurricular activities, transportation, $5,000. So that would be what we would submit to the school board, and then the school board would load the principal's budget accordingly.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councilmember London, Laredo, pardon me.
Thank you, Mayor. On this issue, and I want to move on to the beginning of our presentation. Let me just say, from I first joined this council, I've been a strong supporter of the educational aspects through the advisory board. After the very unpleasant experience of the 2040 committee and the 165,000 balloon from 100,000 for non-deliverables, because some of these educational expenses board are actual deliverables to people. I'm changing my whole mind on how we handle this, so I would hope that the manager has a better explanation. Pursuant to Segurola's questions, I also now have, I'm no longer trusting as I used to. And having said that, I just want to echo, but I want to go back to the manager's presentation because there are some points that I like to pick up. First of all, it's the introduction talking about 3 years of declining real estate values and sort of blaming it directly or indirectly to the current crisis of the virus. That is not relevant because the decline has come before the crisis of the virus. In fact, my whole last 6 months on this issues, whether it's the 2040 committee or other things, is that you're going to see a significant impact on our property values because of this crisis. So take that off the table as an argument for the reduction of expenses. Second of all, as we talk about the millage, and for some of you who may be hearing us, which is basically our tax rates, this wonderfully sounding, we have the lowest tax rates in the village. As you introduce a budget, it's not acceptable to me as a professional approach, because what you need to look at, if you're serious about fiscal responsibility and fiscal savings, is not based on, quote, and I quote the manager, high property values comparable communities, but rather the amount of services that those communities provide. And that is a very important difference. It is the basis of this, we have the money, we have to spend it. It's in fact to use a couple of cities that are not at all comparable. And if I have been in this island 40 years, it's probably the smallest entity that I know in Miami-Dade County, and certainly one of the most easily definable. And so that is kind of a nice thing to say, we have the low tax rate, but the fact of the matter is what we need to do, and the very definition of efficiency is to do more with less, and not simply say, well, we have a low rate tax, which is that. Having said that and clarifying the record on that, I want to ask her some questions as we move forward, because on the cover And again, I'm working with some documents. I haven't been able to get the right documents, and certainly not on a timely basis lately for some reason. She, on the August 27th memo with the budget attached, which is the one I have, talked about that this reduction, among other things, is because of her efforts of reducing, and I quote, reducing professional services, which I imagine that means consultants, outside consultants. Is that correct? If the answer is just a yes or no. Professional services consultants?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So would you tell me briefly three things? Which one have you eliminated? Two, what is the total proposed outside consultants that are in this budget? Three, what is the total amount that you're proposing on lobbyists, which is another professional service, not necessarily consultant?
Okay, thank you for that. So with regard to less reliance on contracted services, so in the building department, we reduced 75,000 based on the council direction. We removed the local lobbyist from the council budget, 18,000. We reduced the funding for
That's the state of Florida?
They did local, so there was.
Well, what is local, madam?
Miami-Dade County.
Okay, Miami-Dade County lobbyists.
Right.
We had one. Eliminated?
We had a firm that did both local and then also state.
Is it the same?
The same provider, yes. So what we did
Right,
with.
so we do not have a lobbyist in Tallahassee now.
Not for general lobbying. I mean, so right now, so let me take a step back. So the agreement had the current agreement has two components. 18,000 is for what we call local lobbyists.
We need a lobbyist to figure out what the lobbyist contract is.
So we kept, there's the local, which is Miami-Dade County, and then the state. So we kept the state component, and what we eliminated was the local component, which was 18,000. And local.
So the short answer is we are paying for a consultant in Tallahassee.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you did. Go ahead.
If I misspoke, I stand corrected.
Okay.
And then
it happens to be the same firm. Yeah.
It happened to be the same firm, correct? And I can also point out that we're going out to bid for those services as well. So the firm perhaps will change or not. We also reduced the beach funding consultants by 30,000. So there was a team of 3, and we've eliminated one of those consultants there. And we've also reduced the retainer for the financial advisor, which was 44,000. And then we've also by in-housing code compliance so that we have more controls and better level of code compliance, that eliminated 53,000 in these services, these outsourced services. So the total less reliance on contracted services is 259,000.
Which one do you have? My second question, which ones do you have now? What are the listing of the consultants that you have now in the total?
I can give you some offhand, but I think we'd have to get back to you with a more comprehensive list.
Well, this is the time, it's budget time.
Okay, sure. We can run the object code and list.
Can you give me a ballpark figure? Do we know, just off the top of your head, who do we have as a consultant?
Sure. So we have the beach consultant. So we have our federal consultant through Jim Davenport, and then we have Spencer Crowley, who's been helping us out with trying to get into the Army Corps program. So those are the professional services that we have on the beach team. We also have several CCNA, which is continuing service. It's an act that regulates engineering services. So we have a handful of engineering firms on contract with us where we've qualified the vendors and we have rates, but any work authorization in excess of my authority would need to come before council. So you've got those continuing services providers as needed. The council most recently awarded the urban planning consultant to help with the vision plan. I think later this evening, I imagine that topic will come up. It already has come up. So those are.
Well, let's stop there for a minute,
sure,
if I may, because I'm trying to reconcile what you write and I hear from you and your actions. And sometimes small actions to me speak very loudly. Like I said, I've been on another wavelength of trust and not following the former president's caveat to that, which is verify. There was you call it a planning, and it's a study for the year 2040 that was strongly advocated by a board, and originally was for 100,000. And to my, even though for a period of a year I've been trying to articulate to my colleagues and the members of that board that this is not necessary now, particularly in light of our currency. And I wake up one day, it's a Friday evening, before a Tuesday morning, a Tuesday meeting, that 100,000, which is already pretty burdensome, ballooned 65% to 165,000. And more astonished is that you, with from meetings that you had, certainly not with me, approved that increase to 165,000. Now, I respect your professional opinion, but I'm just trying to reconcile your discourse about efficiency and cutting back and having this could not be more not needed at this time, and it's 165,000. That even to postpone it. So it's sort of been a paradigm shift for me because I need to start figuring out exactly what you stand in terms of budget philosophy. And so that in the total that you have now, it includes 165, and you started saying that the council approved. What I just want to add is that the council approved upon your recommendation, which was originally, the original council decision was 100,000. I believe I voted against it. And for a whole year, I've been speaking about holding it off with my colleague, Moss, and you were part of a process that blew it to 165,000. I can't reconcile your message and your actions. I really can't. And I'm trying very, very much to do that. So if you give me the total, if you can't give it to me now, I don't know, because we have 2 weeks before we finalize this budget. But I think you answered that 165 is part of what you're proposing now as outside consultant. So we eliminated this 30,000 and 40,000 for things that were more controversial but semi-deliverable, and you increased to 165 for a study for where we're going to be 20 years from now.
I appreciate your tone, and I appreciate your opportunity.
I've always been very sincere and straightforward. You may not disagree. You may disagree with what I say, but I'm consistent, and I think I'm pretty clear.
Yes,
and I am trying to understand you.
I appreciate that, and I can share with the council. I spent several hours actually thinking about the questions that Councilmember Laredo presented to me, and I drafted a pretty comprehensive email that I can share. And I think my understanding with the vision board, first I'll point out that I don't have the authority to approve the 165, which is why the item came before council for a decision. The second thing that I think that the point on my management philosophy, I try to pursue best management practices and be fiscally responsible. As I understood it, when the item was funded, when the board, I was asked to do an RFP, and we put the solicitation out. And to me, it made sense that the advisory board contribute as part of the engagement and evaluating these proposals and making sure that they could realize the vision of the council in what they were being asked to advise the council on. So I felt compelled to support the board and work in collaboration with them. In particular, what I think is most important for us is that it is a planning exercise that is strategic, and most governments, solidify their long-term goals with inputs of the community. And that resulting document provides us with some starting point for our budget process year after year. And that'll ensure that we make progress towards our long-term goals, even if there are short-term goals we also need to make. So I think we're lacking that strategic plan now, and I felt that the direction that we had been given supported doing a strategic plan, and that it was in the community's best interest to exercise this goal setting process and to adopt a strategic plan. So that was my intent.
May I interrupt you, Mary? It's important. Let's see if we can get a short answer. For about a year, if we were in the same room, you knew that I had a special interest in this, even if you disagreed, because it's okay to disagree, but you knew that I had a particular interest in this matter as been articulated. This item grew 65%. I want to emphasize this. It grew 65%. That person who was interested, whether you agree with it or not, learned about it, was blindsided on the Friday evening when I got the number. I was still 165. At that moment, since you mentioned an email, now I'm going to really expand. I send you an email requesting just simply, do you recommend or not this item? Because it all came, and I want to remind you that it came on stationery of the village and signed by, I believe it's the chairman of the committee who's been coming before us. That went unanswered. It was not until in the debate that Tuesday night that I asked you on the record that you approved it. And I subsequently wrote you, I'd like to hear in writing, what is your logic? Because I find it hard, as I said earlier, to understand how you go from 100 to 165. Putting aside, you know my views on 20 years from now, and a small island that you can walk in half a day, this is not like the consultant was comparing us to the work she did in Miami 21 and other cities that had real changes. And so I'm still, while you give me a very sophisticated answer, your philosophy is, you cut some things, but you increase 165 just out of the blue, and there's no point in blaming. I'm trying to figure out, because now I have to take a look at all of these numbers with a different view, I've been consistent, Madam Manager. I've been consistent in the way you've handled it, but this has thrown me off. And that email that you made me, I will answer you on the record, because some things there that are not correct. But I just want to understand. So to be very specific, I would like to hear the list of consultants that you are keeping, their amounts, and which I imagine includes this $165,000 consultant.
So the 165 is in the current year budget. We don't have funding for that in 21's budget. And we will.
Okay, I'm trying to arrive, I'm not that sophisticated financially, but I'm sort of cash oriented, like most taxpayers are, including real estate property taxes, because they have to write a check at the end of the year. It's on last year's budget, on this year's budget. That's wonderful. Financial talk, it's money. It's $165,000 of taxpayers' money. And some of us are trying to hold those expenses down. And even if you agree with the issue, there was a second level of concern, which is, can we at least postpone this, since we're traveling through some troublesome time? And it got no footing, obviously. I didn't get the result. I didn't get the approval, including some people who call themselves fiscally responsible. But be that as it may, you're the professional here. That's why when I first approached you on that Friday evening by email, I said, what is your recommendation? Because I, with my 6 colleagues, hire you to be the professional. We are unpaid volunteers. I don't have enough time already. We're all providing enough time to analyze every one of the things, but it was evident that an issue that is at 100,000 of concern grows to 165, and this councilman, who technically is one of your members of the board of directors to hire you, never heard about this until Friday evening. It's not the way I'm used to doing business in the public or in the private sector. Simply not. And I'm very surprised. Be that as it may, Mayor, that's enough. She'll give me eventually the list and the justifications for.
You'll have that by the next meeting. Fair enough.
And on the staff travel, Mayor, I don't know, because of the answer that she gave to Segurola's concern about travel, that she'll get back to us. Can we just move? I happen to think that we should eliminate. I cannot conceive of any staff travel in the next 12 months. We have to make policy. I don't want to have to revisit this in 2 weeks. I'm against it. I can't imagine anything urgent that we would want to fund. It's insignificant amounts of money, but they're symbolic type of money that our taxpayers need to know that we're trying to cut. So I don't know when we're going to start making motions to
Well,
eliminate
what
or
I'd like to
abstain.
do, what I'd like to do is hear from everybody, and then I'm
Okay.
making a list of whatever.
Are you making notes?
I'm taking notes, like Councilmember
Okay.
Cirillo brought up a bunch of things that I think are policy discussions. I mean, I think
Okay.
about placeholder for the library, the bike lanes, the urban planner, the community groups, youth council, youth leadership, and the travel issues.
Okay.
Discuss those as a group and come to something. But I wanted to hear from everybody first before we went forward with all the specific issues that
Thank you for giving me the time here.
No, absolutely. Councilmember,
Mike,
you're recognized.
sorry, with that in mind, should we then, if someone has already said something, we shouldn't re-say it? We'll just come to it at the end.
I'm not going to preclude anybody from saying what they want to say here.
Well, I won't repeat it. Thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Councilmember Petros, you're recognized.
Hi, thank you. A couple things, and the first one I wanted to ask of all of us is there's 3 budgets in here in particular that I think we have some ownership of. Obviously, the first one's the council. I would like to propose that we look at that and see where we can make cuts, and travel is obviously one that we can talk about, but I think we should go through those tonight. They're small, but they're important, and anywhere we can cut money, that would be great. The clerk, because our clerk is brand new, and I haven't had a discussion with her, but I would potentially like to go over that as well with all of us. And the attorney, I would like to make a suggestion that we look to shift some more money into labor relations, because we do have a CBA out there, and I think it's important that we make sure we fund our legal counsel for that situation. I also have been giving a lot of thought to the community groups, and I even contacted almost all of them that had asked for an increase this year. And I wanted to propose that we look to fund no higher than what we funded last year. And we may look to cut some of these, but if we are cutting, and I think that this is a good idea with travel too, is to think about having some, like a separate line item, and we can call it, one of the thoughts was like a pandemic response fund, so that if we're cutting the budget, we have some available money, because we don't know what's going to happen. And there may come a time in this upcoming year where people have a justification for funds that we are letting go of right now in the interest of being very efficient, but they may come before you as a group and request money. Like, for example, the Car Week was mentioned, which I understand there was some talk of doing it in the fall, but they were also interested in potentially doing it next spring or even next fall. And if we cut their budget tonight, maybe if they actually could host that event and the council felt it was relevant and important for the community, that you would have the ability to use some money in a reserve fund that's been set aside specific for the fact that we have this COVID pandemic going on. And that may be something that we could do for travel and also for training, so that there's a little bit of flexibility. My understanding is that I also spoke to Todd about how he budgeted for this year, because I felt like his department was the one that had the biggest impact through COVID. And pretty much what he tried to do was eliminate the revenues in Q1, which is obviously going to run from October to December 31st. And that might be something that we think about too, and it makes sense. But if we want a little more flexibility, we could look at going a little deeper and having some reserve funds in place. So I think we should discuss that tonight. The last thing that I'd like to ask Andrea is to give us as a group an understanding. We spoke about it a little earlier today, the ramifications of 2 things that we're doing in this budget. One is that we're using the increase in franchise fees to help balance our operating budget, which is helpful, obviously. And we're also using the expenditure that we had for the debt that fell off, which is a little over 800,000. That is also being used for the operating budget. And what that means is there's a limitation of what we can borrow with general revenue bonds, sorry. So I don't know if you got answers, or if you could give answers before the next budget hearing, so we understand from a planning perspective how we've limited ourselves for our capital improvement projects.
Yes, thank you. So I can speak to the ramifications of using the franchise fee revenues and the debt falling off in 2021. We absolutely did do that to balance this budget in 21. The way we think about it is really a pay as you go approach. We're expecting the economy to recover. We're expecting our internal, our intergovernmental revenues to rebound. We're expecting the community center to recover. But right now, and to answer your question that we spoke about earlier today, by 2022, so that debt hasn't fallen off, that'll give us some additional capacity, but we are assuming that we get back to where we were by the end of 21, if not sooner. And so we do intend to be able to, if that's the will of the council, leverage that revenue or that the funds that have become available in the instance of the debt falling off to pledge for debt service. And roughly speaking, if we recover and use the franchise fees and then the additional debt that falls off in 22, our borrowing capacity would be around 45-50 million in 22.
And if we didn't have recovery and we end up in the same situation next year, what is the number where you have to use this money?
Assuming that we don't get any worse, right? So let's assume that we keep franchise fee revenues used for operations and we keep the 21 debt that fell off, then you would only have the additional 22 debt, which would give you about half of that. So about 25 million.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Petros, you had your first point. I missed it. Somebody sent me a text. What was your first point right before the community groups? I'm sorry, before the clerk. Before the clerk?
I was speaking about community groups, and I felt like we could potentially, a thought I had was we should not be increasing funding.
No, sorry. Before clerks, you made a comment and said you had clerks, then attorney, then community groups, and I missed the thing before clerks. I just wanted to have it so we could speak about it.
Okay, the other thing was the idea of doing some type of reserve funds.
No, I got that.
Okay. Well, then I don't remember what it was.
Labor relations attorney.
Oh, the labor relations attorney.
No, that was after clerk. Anyway,
right.
All right. Well, if you remember it, we'll.
Okay.
When we're talking.
So before clerk was council budget, that we should look and see if there's any additional cuts we can make in our own budget.
Thank you. Okay.
And the clerk. And then the clerk. You were with the conversation of the clerk, obviously, but.
Perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure I have them all written down. I don't want to miss anybody. Member Moss. Vice Mayor Moss, I apologize.
That's fine.
Nice
Thank you.
I
won't, repeat some of the stuff that some people have already said. Youth Council, I believe that should be under community groups and should be reduced to $5,000. We don't need $10,000 there. A couple other things. The question for the manager, you are bringing in a code enforcement person in-house, correct? In this budget? All right, and then we are currently outsourcing the code enforcement. So are you reducing the outsourcing or are we getting rid of the outsourcing?
Getting rid of the outsourcing.
All right, so we won't have that anymore. And how much were we spending in the outsource portion?
So the net savings is just over 50,000. Code officers, although it's one of the hardest jobs, is not particularly well paid. I probably maybe one. I'd have to get back to you. The savings is about 53, but I can get you the number.
Okay, and then we're also I read at the beginning of your presentation on the budget that you're also eliminating professional service in the building department. Do you know which professional service is being gotten rid of there?
Right. So what had originally been in the budget, we assumed that every time one of our reviewers or inspectors was out of the office, we backfilled them at 100% rate. And so what we did was we basically are now assuming, when I go away, nobody does my work for me. And so that's kind of a luxury that we have in buildings. So we basically only assumed a 30% backfill rate. So only to really move, time sensitive, critical, reviews, as opposed to everybody always getting things handled for them while they're out.
Should that affect the level of service from a residence standpoint or no?
We do not intend for it to. We do have that 30% there, so that if we are approaching our target process review time, we can call somebody in to do the reviews to turn them around within an acceptable timeframe.
A couple other things in the final budget. I'm not sure. I have not looked really closely at the one that was sent on Saturday, and I checked on the internet. I couldn't download it on there either. But I know that in the workbook breakdown of special pay, other current charges, other pay, those are kind of miscellaneous pieces and different areas from compensation. I don't know if we could put an asterisk somewhere at the bottom, maybe just kind of saying what kind of fees are going to be inside those, because it's a little bit unclear unless we're going to propose the large workbook where people can look in the breakdown as a final budget.
So my intention was that that the worksheets are made available and the budget book. So if you had trouble downloading the document, we can get with IT to see where it is.
I have it on email. I just tried to do it on my computer just from the website, but I couldn't do it. I just got the same one that I have printed.
Okay, so we'll take a look at that on the website.
Okay. And then I know that you and I talked about this earlier today. Life, health, disability insurance, workers' compensation insurance, they seem to increase quite a bit every year. I think that we need to, and they're divided up, but I think we need to kind of bundle that together and see historically what the changes have been year after year and see if it's actually sustainable. Because if this was in my business and I'm looking at 13% increases year after year, at some point it doesn't become sustainable. And typically from workers' compensation, the way that I see it in my business, we get a rate towards each employee type, and whether if I hire more people, my workers' comp goes up. If I let go of people, my workers' comp goes down. And sometimes I see that we're going down, but our workers' comp is still going up. And I think you've already started analyzing this from our conversation. So I think having a little bit of a clearer picture of what's going on there and making sure that looking 5 years out, we can negotiate and make sure, find out why things are going up so high and see if we can make any adjustments in order to control that a little bit better. And additionally, utilities, rental leases, property liability insurance, and communication infrastructure. I know those are kind of larger pieces that are divided up individually into the different departments. It would be good to also be able to take those out and look at them as a whole and see how they have changed over the years, because it is hard. Sometimes we adjust it differently in each department year after year, and it's really, really difficult to follow those to see what is actually happening in those areas and what is moving up and how much. So maybe just having like a little side table that would help us see those items separately. And I want to thank you on the property and liability insurance. I know you guys negotiated that, and I think that's I think it was a big savings that you did there. So good job on that. But I think that's it. That's pretty much what I have. I mean, we went over a huge 4 pages of list, but you answered pretty much all my questions. And I agree with the idea of looking at travel per diem if people are not traveling because of COVID-19. That doesn't really make sense to me why that would be increasing.
Rolling around.
So we could take a look at that and see what we can do. Thank you.
So may I?
Certainly, Manager.
So youth council to community groups, yes, it should not be an advisory boards. There was never an ordinance that established that as a board. So we'll move it up, and if it's the will of the council, we can reduce that by 5. With regard to the insurance, Vice Mayor Moss and I and several of the council members, I've had the opportunity to say this actually started, and the case is now settled, but there was an executive session on a litigation matter that took place many moons ago, pre-COVID. And one of the things that I heard at that executive session was the desire from the council to really look at who's providing our coverage. Are we getting the best coverage? Are we getting the best rates? And so at that time, we actually began looking at our coverage and making sure that we were competitive. So that idea inspired us. And subsequently, we have, to Vice Mayor Moss's point, and I'd also like to thank the mayor as well, because he's been instrumental in this too, really been pushing our existing broker of record, as well as looking at other providers to come up with a suite of insurance coverage that adequately protects the village and also saves us money. So right now we are currently negotiating on the property and liability. We weren't far enough along to include this in first reading. Ideally, we can seal some deals by second reading and recognize those savings going into the budget. If we don't finalize the negotiations by the time of the second hearing, I will let you know when we do, and then you'll realize those as savings in the next year's budget. And then with regard to workers, and we'll provide the historic trend on the insurance to help everybody understand what has been happening in the industry. And then in particular with workers' comp, there are two competing factors going on. One, we hadn't properly been providing the compensation, the value of the compensation, which is one factor in addition to the risk of the position itself, how much the people are earning. And that is a function of what the cost is for the workers' comp. So we did it what we call a true up, basically, when we recognize that we fully load what the cost is. So that actually drove our cost up more than we would have normally anticipated, than we would have anticipated. However, in these negotiations that we've been working on over the past few months, we've been able to not only reduce back to where we were, but we're anticipating some additional savings beyond that. So we'll keep you on up to speed on that. And then with regard to utilities, comm infrastructures, rentals and leases, and the travel, I'll start with the travel and per diem. We will take another look at it. I think there's likely something we can do. We can't eliminate it entirely because part of what is included in that, the transponders that we have for the vehicles to go back and forth through the toll, which is a modest amount, but there is some funding that we need to keep in there just to be able to get to the office and leave the office. And then the communications infrastructure is one of the items that we were really happy this year to be able to get a deeper dive. We have a good accounting of all of our IT infrastructure. What is our footprint? How many devices do we have? How many plans do we have? And by simply going through that exercise, departments have very readily been, coming forth and saying, listen, didn't know we had some, dormant AT&T line in the back office. And, as a result, they've been coming up and saying, let's cut this, we can cut this. So they've taken that. The exercise was fruitful and has resulted in some savings, and we'll continue to look at how we can streamline that. And then with regard to utilities, I think it falls perfectly in line with our intent under resilience and sustainability, where we're going to look at our existing usage of water, of electricity, having sensors, for example, the many of our buildings here, I don't think we have any actual, well, maybe in the bathrooms, but we don't have sensors. We still have light switches, right? So there are some basic things that we can do to our facilities to make them more energy efficient. And that is something that we're going to look at going into this year. So we'll take a deeper dive into those three. And I'll also share that in the backup worksheets, we do call out, we itemize it all in a lot of detail. So we can take another pass at that.
One question I forgot to ask, and I forgot to bring this up, and we can talk about this, but this would be something that I would be interested in the second hearing. I know that we talked about the comptroller last time, and you said that there was that was going to be a temporary possible position. In this budget, have you set a different rate, salary of what a new person would be that would be hired in that position for the next budget year, or no?
So I wanted to clarify, I know this came up previously with regard to, temp versus not. So just so we're all clear, our finance department has 3 people. It has Benjamin Nussbaum, our CFO. We have the comptroller who handles the day-to-day operations. And then we have Lily Galliano, who's basically our payroll clerk and accounts payable clerk. We have a contracted financial advisor. Previously, we paid about $50,000 a year on a retainer. We currently pay $500 a month on retainer for the FA. So that was a big savings. We also, at one point before we onboarded our CFO, we had a contracted CFO. When we found our finance director, we terminated the contract. So there was a little bit of an overlap for onboarding, but that was the goal, that we would contract CFO so that I could hit the ground running, get ourselves up and going. We processed the recruitment. We found our fit. We onboarded Mr. Nussbaum, and then we let go of Chris Wallace, who was the CFO. So basically, there's just 3 people. I think the confusion about temporary or not our comptroller has over 30 some odd years of experience. And so I think the idea of him being temporary in nature was a comment that I made, that, you know, he's not going to be with us for another 30 years because he's, you know, this is sort of a second gig for him, if you will, or perhaps even third. So, you know, I have not changed the composition other than the contract to the FA that was a council, you know, item that was approved. I have not made any other changes to the composition of the 3-member finance department. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah. I just wanted to know if that was in the budget, except I understood it differently when we spoke about it in the workshop.
Okay.
I thought you were saying that they were temporary, like just for a short time or something.
No, I think there was a confusion about the fact that he's been working for many, many years, and so he wouldn't be with us he's not going to be in the workforce as long as Benjamin and I will be.
Okay, but it's a permanent position.
It is a permanent position, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Vice Mayor, you done?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember London, you're recognized. You got to unmute yourself, Ed.
Can you hear me now, Mike?
I can hear you now.
I will not try to go over things that have been said before. With the community groups, I agree that not only should we not raise the amount we give them, but any community group where the participation of the community is in person, such as the Piano Festival, I think we should suspend it, because to have a community piano festival by Zoom or something else, I don't think that's the whole purpose. These things bring people together, whether it's the shorts, everything else. So I would really suspend it or remove it for the budget for the foreseeable future, since we can't get together. So that's my comment on the community groups. Going to the fire department, obviously you're not going to go ahead with any recommendations I made, but the one thing I would want to bring forward right now, and that is the administrative assistant going from part-time to full-time, and really it should be eliminated completely. This is for outreach. You really have an 8-man company. You have 8 men on working. You have 3 executives, a chief and 2 deputy chiefs. And now we have an administrative assistant for the chief, and now we're having one more person. We reclassify them with different names. So at this point in time, I'd like to see the administrative assistant, which is being added to that this year, removed. It was part-time before, now it should be completely removed. For Public Works, I have a question. You're removing your maintenance labor. Well, I only see 1 maintenance laborer, so you're removing a maintenance laborer. Who's going to be doing the maintenance for the Public Works, or we're going to contract out everything? I guess it's my question, Andrea.
Yeah, so two-part solution. In Public Works, you'll notice the reduction in salary of about 45,000, if I recall offhand, and then there's an increase in overtime by like 3,000-4,000. So basically, the gentleman whose position we're eliminating, a lot of the work was, you know, cold patches on potholes, fixing the irrigation heads that were busted, fixing some of the lighting fixtures that were busted. And so right now, those all of that work is part of the landscape contract. So we have that built in, so there's a quicker response time, and then the difference in the overtime. If I do need somebody like Nata to come out, like the no-name storm, and we need to pick things up, if there's a dead animal, if I have a power outage at night and I need to set up an MOT, we put in like $3,000 or $4,000 to be able to bring in existing resources to help with that.
Okay, in your shop, the administrative, you have a procurement specialist. Now, are you just doing that because you have no need for the person in the building and zoning department? You don't want to let her go because she's a very nice person. I understand that. We're just making work. Do we really need that? How do we exist without that? And especially right now, we're trying to make simplified procurement. Why do we have to have that person?
Yes, so that's a great question, and thank you for asking that. So basically, she is a lovely person, and she did express an interest for growth. But that aside, one of my goals and the way that I've been approaching the organization's development is find ways to simplify your job, automate your job, make your job easier, work your way out of the job, right? And so I think to Mr. Fossler's credit, His background was in procurement, and when he onboarded, I learned what the village's philosophy is toward procurement, and we don't need an attorney handling, our day-to-day procurements. It's a simpler function. The village's needs are simpler than what was being offered. So what we did was we worked with our law firm, with Weiss Serota, and we standardized our contracts, we standardized our forms, we standardized our our solicitation documents. So we basically got an inventory of standardized plug-and-play documents. And then for the day-to-day purchases, we now have a system in place where a clerical level individual employee can process the procurements. So it's basically now the departments are they could plug and play on the more complicated procurements. And then I would say 80%, and you can see this in the budget book, the performance measures that we have on procurement, but we've basically, through technology and through training, we've taken what was a more expensive, more difficult, time-consuming role, and we've simplified it, we've automated it, we've streamlined it, and now it's a position that can be done on the clerical level, which is a less costly resource.
That sounds great, but each department has one or multiple administrative assistants, secretaries, all the various job classifications you give to people, and they should be purchased through the departments, not for the department then send it to you. In other words, if police needs something, or fire needs something, or building and zoning, or recreation needs something, why they have to come to you when they have the people, when you have the system set up? Why do you need the extra person?
I think what you're going to find over time is that folks in the administrative capacity are going to have to develop more professional skills and keep up with the technology and what we're doing in order. Their jobs are going to evolve, and there's plenty of work to do as we move forward with some of these infrastructure projects. But I think you have a point, and I think everybody recognizes that. And I think the administrative personnel in all of those departments who are watching, and they're excellent, and they do good work, but I think they know, one of the things, the call center, I think the 311 call center is something where we have a deficiency. Our customer service is not up to par. We don't answer, we're not answering phones and returning calls quickly enough. So one of the things that we're doing in this budget is making, taking some of those resources. And so I don't have a receptionist. I don't have anybody. There's literally, it's between the three of us in this area, one of us is here at all times, and we have a bell. And if somebody wants to come in, they ring the bell, and I walk out and I greet our guests, So people recognize that, they've got to sharpen up their skill sets, and either their job will need to evolve for folks to be competitive and to continue to be here.
And the building and zoning, the special projects coordinator, what kind of special projects do we have in building and zoning?
So that was actually the gentleman that I referenced when we were going through the presentation, who did the floodplain manager. So I'll tell you his most recent accomplishment was he did the floodplain review for St. Agnes. So he's actually taking on, real, it's actually previously a building official level task that we were a bit behind on. And so now we had a permit clerk who actually we sent to school and he became a certified floodplain manager. So his knowledge and his now developed talents, he's going to be doing the floodplain reviews for the village, which will reduce our reliance on Tetra Tech, who we had previously spent hundreds of thousands of dollars with in consulting fees without ownership of the output. So now we're processing it ourselves in-house, and we're owning the output, and we're eliminating Tetra Tech.
So is this actually a permit clerk?
He was a permit clerk, yes.
So now, is there going to be enough work for him to be a special projects coordinator, or is he also going to be a permit clerk? Because you're reducing permit clerks. So my question is, if you have the need or demand for permit clerks, will he then also fill in, or are we going to go hire somebody else again?
He could always fill in and the same with any, that's part of also my strategy is cross-training people. So okay. In the event we lost two folks, at the same time in building, and we had, 2 or 3 other people who were able to jump in, myself included, when we went live with the permitting system, I sat as a permit clerk. I could process a permit if anyone needs it. So yes, they are cross-trained, and we wouldn't bring somebody else in. They can always.
Also in building and zoning, we have a senior executive assistant. For years, we had no assistants. Now we have not a regular assistant, we have a senior executive assistant. What's that?
So you had a senior executive
Well,
assistant.
no, that was only for the last couple of years. Before you came, we had nobody there. Then they moved somebody in. So that was another job that was created.
So that job has been eliminated and it's frozen in the budget. So with regard to personnel costs, this budget reduces staffing by $481,354.
That job is eliminated, senior executive assistant?
Yes, sir, it's
Okay,
frozen.
great.
So what I did do was I froze the position and I eliminated the funding. I believe through automation and through the technology that we
Okay,
have,
great,
we
great.
can
Well
make
done.
up most of the work.
Well done, sweetheart. Next one.
Thank you.
Executive assistant, code compliance.
That is the same position. Code compliance, BTR, admin, executive
That's
system.
all right, fine. That's good. All right, fine.
Same position.
Then we get the police. We have dispatchers. You have what, 3 dispatchers?
So in dispatch, it's a 24/7 operation. We
Four
have
people.
dispatchers and then a communication supervisor over
Well,
dispatch.
hold on one second. You show 3 dispatchers, which is
Three
short.
and then the supervisor and then the
Well,
supervisor.
then you show a communications supervisor. Is that a dispatcher?
That's she can serve as dispatch. She's qualified, but
Well,
I
you have,
need
you
to
need 4
defer to.
shifts to work 168 hours. They work 42-hour shifts. What is you're missing one, unless that is also going to work. Is that, or is it just another title to pay more money?
No, Chief Press, if you could explain how the operation of the dispatchers works. Or Ms. Guerra, I don't know that I see Chief Press with
No,
us.
here.
There he is.
He's there. Chief's here.
Thank you, sir.
Of course I'm here. Good evening. Dispatchers, we have 4. The supervisor also serves as a full-time dispatcher. So that is your 4 shifts, Ed. Yet at the same time, she handles administrative functions and the duties of running the unit, scheduling the unit, training the unit, et cetera, and so forth.
My question, Chuck, is that it's when it says executive, what's it called? Senior exec, communication supervisor. Is that the dispatcher supervisor?
Yeah, and she is one of the 4 dispatchers who has additional duties of supervising, overseeing, et cetera.
Gotcha. So there's a total of 4 then, right?
That's
Or
it.
5?
That's all we have. Yes, sir.
Well, the 4 or 5?
4, sir.
4, okay. And then we have an administrative services coordinator.
Yes, sir.
What's that?
She serves as our CAD RMS administrator, so she runs the CAD RMS system. She also serves as our property and evidence technician. She's our crime scene investigator. She's a part-time dispatcher when we need relief, and she's the backup training coordinator. So she actually has 5 different roles, weird titles that we've got, but she serves 5 different jobs.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you, Chuck.
Yes.
Let's see. The other thing is I think this is going back to the legal. I think Katie said we should increase the labor since we're doing the CVAs this year. I disagree. I think we don't want to drag this thing out. Either we come to an agreement, we don't come to an agreement, we go to impasse, whatever is necessary. But I don't think it's necessary to add any more money to the labor thing. Also, we have legal for underground. We have $50,000. I don't understand how we're going to, not 50,000, but reduced by $50,000, I'm suggesting, because I don't see a big use of legal for undergrounding this year. Obviously, my one last thing, which you all have been made aware of, you all disagree with me, but I showed you where you could save $3 million. Obviously not immediately because of the CBAs, but you tend to pay no attention to that, so that's fine, but I've made my position clear. That's in police and fire. I won't even get into building, zoning, and everything else, because this was the easy fruit, the low-lying fruit to pick, which you tend not to care, not you definitely care about, but you tend not to consider what I've suggested. That's it, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember McCormick?
If I may, one point of clarification, Councilmember London, the BTR position was frozen. The second position you referred to, I actually think was the senior executive assistant in building, which is Mariana's position, which is not frozen and is fully funded. So I wanted to make that distinction. One of the positions has been frozen and not funded. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Councilmember McCormick, you're recognized.
Okay, so I don't have many questions. The manager and I have been working on this budget a lot over the last few weeks, and she's really incorporated many of my thoughts over that time period. And I did have one question that I think I know the answer to, but I just wanted clarification. In the CIP, the lights on Crandon Boulevard, not the uplighting, but the electrical work, is that funded through the transportation fund?
So the electrical receptacles on Crandon, I think is in our operating budget, and I am not sure if it is PTP eligible. We'll take a look. If it is, it's not eligible for transportation.
It isn't. So we're using like ad valorem revenue for that.
Right.
Okay. And then I think I have comments on other things that people brought up and things I'd like to discuss, but I can wait until we get to that point. The only other thought that I had is I think that it seemed to work well when we gave what I thought was clear direction to the manager. We set the trim notice. We said we would like you to get as low as you possibly can. Like I said, I've been working with her. I'm sure other people have too. I think they've done a good job trying to get as low as they possibly can. And I think that after our discussion, while clearly people have line by line questions and maybe desires to get rid of things, I think by the end of today's discussion, it would be helpful for us to have another clear directive like that. If there's a particular millage that you want her to get to, or so that we don't get into the end of the second budget hearing and suddenly want to make cuts and have no idea what the impact's going to be, what services would be impacted. So that would be my request for the end of our discussion, that if we're going to have additional needs and that there's a goal we want to get to, that we try to lay that out for her. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I really don't have any items specifically to add. A lot of the things we've talked about, I think I would like to, I understand, I share everybody's concerns about going forward. I did want to point out, a couple of council members have brought up the fact that we've had 2 down years. Somebody said 3, but I believe it's been 2 down years that we've had. Let's remember, we still are a financially strong community. We're doing well. I think the manager has made an effort to meet the requests of this council to bring down the expenditures. I think there are items here that we're going to discuss that can probably bring us down a little bit. To Ed's point, I tend to go with the experts when they tell me what they need to run their departments. I go with them. I think this has so far been a fairly productive discussion. To Councilmember Laredo's point, I would ask the manager to get the information to us as soon as possible. I think it was difficult this time getting it on a Saturday. I think you did an incredible job. The budget book was very nice, but I would have preferred to have, in my case, it would have been hard copy. But I think going forward, if that would just be, I know there was a lot of work. I know Tom Fossler spent a lot of time. I'm sure Benjamin was involved in a little bit of this. So I understand y'all put a lot of effort, but I would ask for just a little bit more time on the budget. And I guess, Councilmember Segarola was citing to different points, and I was looking at my version that I have in front of me, and the numbers are different. They're not dramatically different, but there are differences in travel and, page numbers. Not even. They weren't actually the numbers. It was the page numbers were different. So I don't know where the distinction is there, but I think we all absolutely need to be on the same page when we get to that final read of this. I guess what I'd like to do now is, having written down a lot of your points, and again, if I miss something and somebody feels like we don't discuss it, but I'd like us to go through all of these points and have a discussion. I think the first one should be about community groups. I am in support of keeping the numbers the same as they were last year. And again, this is just putting my words out there. I do think I understand the concerns because you're all right. We don't know what's going to happen with this pandemic. We don't know if these people are going to be able to get together. But I like, actually, Councilmember Petros had the best idea to my mind so far is let's put it in a reserve so we at least have it. We budgeted here. It's not like we're trying to add more to the budget at this point. It's in the budget. And if these community groups are able, Winterfest, I know there's a high probability that it won't be able to go off. But frankly, I think that's one of the things that in this community, if we can put it off to, let's say, February, to second quarter, which, February, and we can do it then, I think that's just a tremendous event in this village. And it's something that that everybody would really, it's really important to this village. And I really see a need in this village for us to come together at some point when we can, if need be, socially distanced, but be together. So things like that, I'd like to see us maybe create a reserve for those sort of things, so that we can bring that together. So I would bring up the community groups. I agree with, I would start with that item, and I would agree with Councilmember Petros that maybe put it in a reserve to those items. Don't go any higher than we funded for last year, and move that along. And Ed, I apologize. You had a different point on the community groups. You said suspend, and I guess that may apply to what I'm saying is budget for them, but hold that money in reserve, understanding we're not going to put it toward anything else, but understanding we're not just saying, go spend it. Don't force them to spend it, but if they need it, I'd like them to have that opportunity.
No, I'm saying, Mike, that's not what I said. Mike, what I said was that any of the events, any of the community events, whether it's piano or whatever the other events, if they cannot be live, in other words, if our people cannot attend and keep us going, and right now it doesn't appear they can attend to a number of these different events, that we shouldn't fund them. Why should we put in the budget and say we're going to fund them when they're not going to perform?
Well, I guess the question becomes, Councilmember McCormick, then Petros, then Laredo. I see all popping up with the hands. I guess my point would be, and then Segarola, we've got the money earmarked. I just wouldn't like to take it out of the budget and then suddenly have it. So that's why I like Councilmember Petros's idea. But Councilmember McCormick, you're recognized.
I wonder if there isn't some way to sort of try to meet in the middle between Ed and Katie, and maybe try to do a lower dollar amount. And what I heard about what Katie said, well, two things. First, Katie, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to reach out to the community groups and speak with them. That was definitely on my list to do, and I didn't get to it. So I appreciate that you did that. And the other was, I'm not sure if this is what you intended, but what I heard was this idea of making sort of this COVID fund where we could draw that money to support a community group if it could actually happen. But if it couldn't, it struck me that it also was perhaps another fund should things go in a worse direction and we run into situations that we did earlier. We have some money there in case we need it for, I can't even begin to imagine what it would be, but I couldn't have imagined that we needed the testing unit, 7 months ago. So perhaps make that fund more flexible. I don't know if that appeals to anyone, but at perhaps a reduced number, given the fact that we think it is likely that many of these community events aren't going to happen. So rather than take the full amount into a fund, reduce the number and put it for the fund, but also should things get worse, we have it as sort of a COVID backup.
Okay, Councilmember Petros?
Okay, so expanding on my idea and listening to Ed, if I look down this list of things that are funding events that happen in person, we're talking about the Piano Festival, Car Week, the 4th of July Committee, the Art Festival, and those are the main ones. So if I add all those up, it's $84,000. And that money, we could eliminate it on the line items of each one of these things. And we could, if we wanted to do the whole amount, which is only funding that we adopted last year, I'm not talking the money that was asked for. If we wanted to take it down to 75,000 and create like a pandemic response fund, that each one of these organizers could come before us if it's deemed that they can host these events at whatever time during the year. They could make a pitch to the council specifically for requests. So that would take out the actual funding on the line items, but it would provide this amount of money that could be available, I guess, for each one of these events. And you guys could decide as the time goes on throughout the year. There's flexibility there. The other thing that I would mention, well, two things. First, the art and public places was adopted at 35,000. It's proposed again, and that is something I feel is for specific art projects. And we could probably hold off this year and at least get it down to maybe 5,000. If there's some incidentals, I would want to hear from the committee. But if it is for an installation, then that is certainly something that we could hold off for the next year. And that would be a way to take some more savings. And then the youth council, I would want Councilmember Moss to speak on this, because this was actually something that I believe he was going to initiate and put in the budget, but maybe that can be wrapped in with youth leadership, and we can have youth initiatives, which again, doesn't necessarily have to be a total of 27,000, but we could reduce that slightly too. So those are my thoughts.
Councilmember Laredo.
Thank you. I wanted to have asked this at the beginning, but I guess I asked now since, and my first question, well, the question is to the village attorney. And given that some confusion and reluctance to take a stand on an issue when we had the last controversy about the 2040, I'd like to ask specifically on this budget, Mr. Attorney, what items do we have to do a supermajority, if you can tell me, which is 5, and which items, and number 2 is just as important as we move, particularly since we move forward in this item, items that fall under section 7.05 of the charter, which is unanimous.
Well, so the first question on which requires a supermajority, you're going to pass the budget and the millage by simple majority. The items that require unanimous is for a grant or a charitable contribution. That we don't have something in between for purposes of this budget and millage tonight.
Right.
So
I wanted to ask, see if you can answer my question. As it relates to the budget that you have a copy, not in general terms, what item requires a supermajority, which means 5 votes?
None. The only items that require more than a simple majority are the grant and charitable contribution.
All right, so that's section 7.05 of the charter, correct? That you rule that it did not apply to the.
It did not apply to the 20. That's correct.
Okay. So does it apply to the community groups, which are grants?
It may apply to the community groups. I think that an individual factual determination has to be made on each one. We've never had the issue in the past because the council has always approved these groups by 7-0 vote during the budget. I think that what had been put forward was that Councilmember Cigarello and the manager worked out a form that prior to any funding being
I understand, Mr. Attorney. I need an answer. The answer may be that you don't know, but actually, I have to make a decision now on some items.
Councilmember Laredo.
Councilmember Cigarello, you're not recognized.
Wait a second. I want to get this clear before we make votes. I couldn't get an answer last time. Under the section 7 of which is very clear language.
Well,
I don't need to read it to you, do you?
I did give an answer to you last time. I said that was not.
You couldn't put it in writing. I understand.
No. The council directed me not.
What I want to know before I vote is on the items before me, section 7.025. Do I need to read them, or you know?
I have it in front of me. I have it in front of me. It's 7.05.
That would be the community groups. Would it not?
Again, It's a factual determination that would be made. I don't think that.
Well, if I give money to the community foundation, that's a grant, is it not?
Again, the community foundation is providing services to the village.
All right, let's do the 4th of July parade.
I'm not going to be able to answer those questions tonight, whether it's 7-0 vote. I think that, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
No, you're not prepared, but we're in the project process. How am I
No,
supposed to vote?
it's not that I'm not prepared. It's that these are all very detailed, factual determinations that are made. Whether or not the village is receiving adequate consideration in return for the money they're giving. So these are not, and just like you, I take the charter very seriously, and I don't, I look at every single one very closely. So, well,
let me read for the record.
Sure.
7.05, grants and charitable contributions. The village shall not make any grants or charitable contributions to any person or entity except such grants or contributions as have been approved by all 7 members of the councils. How do you go from that clear language to an interpretation that we have to take each one at a time and analyze what a charitable contribution is and what a donation is? I don't understand. It's so clear to me. Perhaps another lawyer in the group can explain, because I'm not.
I would speak to the point that if we receive a benefit of the monies we're providing to these different groups, if the community is receiving a benefit, I believe that weighs into it's a grant, donation, or are we receiving something in return for our provision of funding?
Mr. Mayor, if I may a sec.
Councilmember Cigarrola?
Councilmember Laredo, to your point, the form that the manager came up with my input has a section at the end for a legal attorney, whether or not something is a grant or a donation or whatnot. And to the best of my knowledge, the village attorneys have not filled out that part of the form and sent it back to us. It's still pending. And I would ask the manager and the attorney to get together and send those forms to us, which will include their legal opinion, exactly to your point, as soon as possible, before the next
All
hearing.
right, then I move to defer this to the next meeting until we get this. Because we were going to discuss this now, but without that, I'm not prepared to vote. I can't possibly vote, create more chaos than postponing it for 2 weeks. Or we can conversely, Mayor, to make time, some that we can agree on and maybe vote one at a time. I'm prepared to move some of them.
Okay,
I happen to believe that, for example, it is still a contribution. It's a charitable contribution, but we have a historical, I think there's, of all the groups, there's one that has a historical embedded, almost part of our DNA, is the 4th of July Committee. And interestingly enough, they asked for the same amount. So it doesn't even have to address Petros's concern. So I would move that one, and I would move the other. I think that by far the most important dependent community that we have is our senior citizens, and the great work that the community center and the Ask Club does in providing them.
Are you asking, just to be clear now, are you bringing one
I'm
item?
moving them up so that we can.
Not all of them. Are you bringing one up? Because you're saying that.
I'm bringing up 2, but yeah, I'll move the first one as the 4th of July committee.
Well, I'm not, I mean, I guess.
Or we can postpone the whole thing until we get an opinion.
Well,
we finished the discussion we were having first about Katie's fund idea, because we're moving them, but we don't know even what we're doing with them.
Right. Well, first of all, yeah, that there's the whole idea of what Councilmember Petros is proposing that we're dealing with. Then there's your whole concern about whether this is a charitable donation or a grant, or it's actually a fee for service, which is my opinion. Councilmember London or Vice Mayor Moss, did you want to recognize on this count? Vice Mayor, Councilmember London, you're recognized.
I agree with Katie. I think it's a great idea. And since we don't know what's going to happen, we have the fund during the year. If people can need the money because they can put something on, they come to us, we approve it or not.
Clarify, I wasn't talking to defund the 4th of July committee. I didn't mean that in any way.
I mean
It's incredibly important. So I just want to make that clear. I put that in because it's an in-person. I'm trying to be consistent, and I think we need to be consistent. And what Councilmember Laredo's talking about blows all of this. Like, we can't make any decisions about any of this if we're gonna be looking in that direction, which I'm not saying yes or no to, but we need to figure that out first.
Okay, Vice Mayor Moss, did you want to say anything on this before we move forward?
No, I agree with you guys. I keep it at least at the same price, and with the COVID that's happening and uncertainty, I'm okay with what you're saying, Katie, that we can reserve some of that funds, and if things open back up, we use them for what they need it for, and if they don't, we can use them in other ways. That what Councilmember McCormick said, if we have an emergency with COVID, we have money there.
Councilmember Segurola, I see you waving your hand.
I think we should go one by one and basically come up with a tentative funding amount that we're willing to live with, that we can later add up and create this pooled fund for later, pending the legal opinion regarding these applications for grants.
Okay, there's two questions now. The motion is, okay, what is the motion? Who's putting forward a motion on the items? Because then there's a second motion as to a legal opinion on.
I made a motion on the 4th of July committee for the requested of 30,000.
But that wasn't actually the question before us, sir. The question before us is really about Petros's proposal. That was the first proposal.
I'll make mine a motion, which is to fund things at no higher than what was funded in 2020. And the second part of that is to take the in-person events and lump them together as a pandemic response fund that people can come forward throughout the year when and if it's appropriate to host these events.
Second.
Right, we have that seconded. Councilman
Mayor, a point of order, if the ruling, if it requires a 7 vote,
well, then we would have to make that vote when we free the money to that organization. We're actually defunding these organizations at this point. So it takes no.
My point was, I was trying to resolve it by moving. You see some that we have a general agreement on, and leave the other ones, because I have a lot of questions about others, and I don't want to exercise the 7.
We're going to get to your question next. I promise. I'm bringing. Okay. I understand. I've written. I think I want you to make a motion, but. We're on this motion. It's been seconded. Councilmember McCormick, you had a point on this motion?
I was just going to say, I'm looking at these. I see them as services. Of course, that's not a legal opinion, but perhaps Councilmember Laredo and Segurola could share which ones they don't want to fund so that we could move that conversation. For me, I'm fine to vote yes on all of them with the stipulations of no funding increases and moving it to a COVID fund. So I mean, it may be that we're all at 7-0 anyway, but if we're not, it sounds to me like the people we're hearing from are council members Laredo and Segurola, and perhaps if they could share with us what their concerns are, maybe we could just deal with it now.
That is McCormick, that is why I was proposing your same proposal, but the reverse. Let's see what we have agreement on and take it off the table. And I was moving.
Right, so I'm telling you, I'm good on all. So which ones are you not?
I want to move one by one, but if
let's go one by one. So
come on, guys, let's just take this one step at a time. We've got a motion on the floor. I understand what you're doing. We're essentially withdrawing all funding from all of these programs, correct? All of the community groups, and they have to come to us if they want to go forward. Is that right? Or are we just, which ones have we identified? If we have identified as all of them, then I think Councilmember Laredo's point is right. We have to determine which ones are we going to fund with this plan and which ones are we going to leave in place. So, as I understand it, Councilmember Petros's point was that we were defunding all of the community groups, putting those monies as at the same levels we'd funded last year into an essentially a COVID reserve that could be used by these groups going forward should their programs be deemed possible of occurring this year. Is that correct?
Say that again. I was saying that we fund no higher than 2020 levels.
Right.
And that some of these, any one of them that were in-person events, they're basically gonna, with Ed's concerns that they won't happen, we could put them right now funded at 0 and then add that money to the pandemic response fund. It
Okay,
wasn't
but
about you.
There's
is that-
4. Only
There
4,
were 4.
right?
There were
Okay,
4.
those are the only 4 that we're taking out, the Car Week, the Children's Business Fair, the Piano Festival, and the, what was the 4th?
The Children's Business Fair was not funded last year, so that's
Yeah,
a different
it would be
story.
0 this year.
Okay.
So it would
It
be
was
the,
Art Festival, 4th of July, Car Week, and Piano Festival.
Art Festival?
Winterfest is not in here.
Okay,
Winterfest is part of the budget of Parks and Rec.
we'll leave that alone. So Art Festival? Somebody say Art Festival?
Yes, Art Festival / 4th of July
picnic.
picnic.
Sorry.
Oh,
July
okay, all
picnic.
right, 4th of July, okay.
And then
Sorry.
the 4th of July committee is another obviously in-person event. The Car Week and the Piano Festival. If I add all of those 2020 numbers together, I get 84,000.
I get 94,000, 93,500.
Well, I can't
There's
add.
also City Theater.
Oh, sorry. And City Theater would be another one.
And to some extent, Village of Kindness.
Mm,
I don't know if that's an event though.
It's a program.
And for a completely separate reason, I have an issue with zero waste culture.
Yeah, but
I think the zero waste culture, Ignacio, is actually mislabeled because this
Yeah.
has to do with the composting plan that's
Yeah.
This is KV.
affiliated
Exactly,
with the
that-
state park.
Well, that's the issue. I did some research into that, and I don't think that's something we should be funding at all. COVID or not
composting?
COVID. Yes,
You're against composting?
yes.
Why?
Well, I did some research. It is basically a.
I'm gonna hold off, before you get,
Okay.
I think I'm gonna have to take, Councilmember Laredo's direction is right. I think we've got to take these one at a time and go through them. So.
Correct.
I'm working off the document, Mayor. Again, I'm having a problem with all these, back in the, the hearing in June. And the
Right.
top one is, the 4th of July committee for 30,000, which is not an increase. And so that takes care of Petros's concern as well. So I make a motion to approve it, because I think it has an undeniable historical value. And even if the ruling is that it's a charitable contribution, I think we should unanimously approve it.
Okay.
So I'm trying to eliminate the obvious and concentrate our arguments on those that we have problems with.
So I would say the 4th of July committee, understanding that if we approve, this is, can I rectify your motion just for a smidge?
Yes, yes.
We approve a program here as a group right now, it will then flow into the second motion, which Councilmember Petros has put forward, that the money is held in reserve. Right? Because it's in, is that, you see what I'm saying? 30,000.
Councilmember Laredo, just so that.
I see what
and
you're saying.
I just want to be clear what we're voting. So that's that. I second your motion with that.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I just want to highlight those people. As a matter of fact, I even, because I'm having trouble with the 27 different drafts of documents. You asked me for an example, or the attorney asked me for an example, and I said the foundation, which is probably precisely the wrong example. But there are also the right examples of things that have an embedded continuum historical value, and that's one of them. But I see what you mean. I just want to send a policy decision that, notwithstanding the ruling of those attorneys' opinions, I think we can probably have 7 votes on that.
Okay, so.
And that's why I want to take it off the table and then put it on the hold. You're right. You're right.
Key Biscayne 4th of July parade has been seconded. Any discussion on the Key Biscayne 4th of July parade?
For point of clarification, Mike, for the dovetail, maybe when this draft comes out in 2 weeks, under the pandemic response fund, we can list the things that we've included in there so they don't get forgotten.
Perfect.
Okay.
Right, and what I wanted to say that it was consistent, my motion with one of Petrus's points of view, or better in London, is that it is the same request. So it's one of those who did not
Correct.
actually make an increase. So it covers also that policy.
Right, now, we're approving, but it's subject to the second motion. So we're simply, okay, Councilmember Moss, Vice Mayor.
Quick question about the second motion. It being in reserves until somebody uses it is typically the way it's going to work anyways, right? But what you're saying is that you want them to have to come back to council and ask for it?
I think that you should, yes, I think, because then there's flexibility. And I think that in a year like this, you need flexibility to fund things, and that you don't know what it's going to look like. So if we just sit here and do everything like we've done for many years, I think you're selling yourself short, and you may want to use that money for something else. I don't want to do it in a way that then there's this appearance that we're getting rid of things that have been around for many, many years, because that isn't the intent either. It's meant to support them and shift money in an easy way for you in the upcoming year if you need it for something else and that event isn't going to happen.
Well, I just want to clarify that if the event doesn't happen, the money doesn't get spent, right?
Right.
And if the event does happen, will they need to come back to council and ask for it? We would have to approve it. Is that what you're saying? Or would the manager say, okay, you're having the event, it was here, it's in a reserve, here you go, it's already ready to go, and you just want to have like at the end of the day, we can just see what we still have in there, I guess. That's what I'm just trying to clarify, what we're doing in that event and what you want to do there, Councilmember Petros.
I think it can go either way.
Councilman Moss, one of the reasons I'm moving this way, so that you understand, is to solidify those things that we truly believe in, and therefore have a consensus of 7, because we may have a different composition of a council come at the time of expenditure, but they could not be able to overrule a 7 member vote. I'm trying to move on things that have a historical value of our community, that we may have seven a consensus. That's all. We're all trying to arrive at the same thing.
Vice Mayor's point is valid. Do we now, well, you're going to move for a 7-0 vote. I don't think we need a 7-0 vote, but regardless of that, how is this going to play out in, what's the intent of this? Should the 4th of July parade, because they've got to start, really in February, right? That's when things get going, when the meetings start and they start planning. I don't know when they start expending money or when they commit money, but when do they have to come back to us? When can they come back to us?
I think this is pretty easy. If you want to give it to the manager, you could do that. Every single one of these is under her $50,000 limit. And if that streamlines things, but then these community groups come to us directly. So now it's really how you feel about it. We could leave it just like it is if you want, but I was trying to.
I understand what you're doing. I do.
Is the idea, Katie, that some events, given the COVID, may in the end require more funding while others less, and that gives us flexibility? Or were you thinking we could overall, because another idea is we could overall budget less, which goes to us trying to really work on keeping the millage down, but still have the flexibility for, we like hedge our bets. We know that of these 5 events, they're not all going to happen. So we could budget less money, and whoever actually gets to go can draw from this special fund. Is your idea to fund less, but be able to pay individuals more? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, we can't fund less and pay more, but I understand what you're saying.
Fund less overall.
Overall.
And then for the individuals, let's say that their requirement for this year is more than we funded from based on last year, but they could still get that full amount, but we'd be okay because 2 of the other events weren't able to happen. So was your idea that we were getting the aggregate down, and then we just had flexibility to pay out whoever could actually happen?
I think that's a safe way to do things because I don't think all that money will be spent. So I think we could reduce our millage by consolidating some of these things. And yet that doesn't mean that we're saying no to any of them. So yeah, if I'm hearing you correctly, I agree sort of with both of your points, to be honest.
Okay.
We've got 4th of July has been seconded. Do I have any more discussion on the 4th of July?
Michael,
Sir,
Michael?
Councilmember London, you're recognized.
Yeah, what I understand, excuse me, they will come back to the council. In other words, they decide to go ahead, they're gonna come back to us, then we decide to go forward.
Okay.
Is that the motion?
This is gonna go really.
Does I understand it?
Councilmember Petros, do you want to clarify?
That was my original intent, that you would have this money that was a pot for all these in-person events, whether you wanted to fund it at the actual dollar amount that's when you add all the 2020 numbers together, or if you wanted to slightly reduce it. But when in fact one of these events could happen, they would come back to the council, they would tell you their proposal at that time, how it's been altered, and then you would approve it or not.
Thank you.
Okay. Moved and seconded on 4th of July. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, so 4th of July is unanimously approved.
I move the active senior citizens of Key Biscayne.
Well, but that wouldn't be, that's not one of the get-togethers. There, are we talking are we gonna go through this whole list? Each one?
I'm from the school where I come from of eliminating
Okay.
the obvious rejects and the obvious accept. That is probably.
All right, well, I'll second the active seniors if we're gonna go through each one of them. Moved
That
and
way, let's
seconded.
work on next week.
Discussion? Okay. Vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, the next.
I would like to make a motion that we move off of this list. They shouldn't be here. The Chamber of Commerce and the Key Biscayne Community Foundation, who both are vendors to the village, who have a contract with us, and it's fee for services rendered. I think they should be, we could ask the manager what budget she thinks they're best under, but my guess would be the manager's budget.
Right.
But both the chamber and the foundation really don't operate as community groups. They perform services for the village and are paid for the services. Well, the foundation isn't paid for the work, they're just paid for their expenses. They sort of donate their work, but I think that they should move.
Great.
Absolutely.
Seconded.
And that is why I said earlier that I'm picking off the top of my head an example before they pick the wrong one, because that doesn't mean that we're going to approve these amounts, but it really does not belong in a community group. I'm confused, and I confused a little bit, but we take it off as well as the Educational Advisory Board.
They're not here. They're not in the community groups.
Well, then I'm looking at the wrong document. I'm sorry. I apologize at the beginning. I'm having a hard time getting up-to-date information from the administration. I started the meeting on that note, and so I apologize if I created confusion, because as I said earlier, I support the advisory board, and I wanted to discuss them separate.
Okay, but yeah, let's go through
outside of the section 7.05. You see,
right.
When I bring up something, is I have something in mind. I'm trying to say things that are worthwhile from consequences.
Maybe it would be helpful if we reshared that screen.
Yeah, but it's a tough time. I mean, I think if we get those two out that we approve, and then I think Katie had made a motion that just say as a preliminary that until next week that we eliminate the requested amount and move on those funded. I don't know how to move this. What I'm trying to do is to save those that in my judgment, are worthwhile, and then spend more time in those that I don't believe we should fund, notwithstanding whether we have a virus or not. There's some that I have views that they're, we talk about we're all this together. Well, we're all on this together. Everybody's got a cut.
And that's what we're trying to work toward right now. Councilmember Petros, you had a comment?
I just wanted to make a motion to amend the movement, which I agree with that Councilmember McCormick said, but also to fund them at the 2020 level. So can we do both of those at the same time if we're moving them to the manager's budget, the chamber and the community foundation?
I second.
We asked the manager what the increase, it's only the chamber had an increase.
Right.
And what was that 9,000 or 8,000 and change for? Like I'd like to know what we're cutting without just saying, let's cut it.
Well, and I will say, I'm sorry, I did not speak to them and I should have, because I was trying very hard to speak to everyone that asked for an increase. And we can just do this tentatively unless, Andrea, you have some real things that you could share with us about this that we should think about prior to going back to the 2020 level.
I'm looking at their form to see what the increase was.
But you see, while she looks that up, Ms. McCormick, if we're going to sacrifice and if we're going to be on this together, the least we can do is go back, the least we can go to 2020 funding. To move forward on this times are symbolically irresponsible. I'm sure that everything in that $8,000.
I just feel that if a vendor is saying we've contracted with somebody to provide a service,
okay,
and we're right now just arbitrarily going to cut a number, if the manager knows what the increase was for, perhaps it's something we want. Like we talked last year and we talked early, I know you said, and I applauded you for saying it when we did the first budget workshop, that this part of the budget is less than 1% of the whole budget. I'm just curious if we know. If we don't know and you guys are comfortable, then only fund it to last year's levels. But I don't think it takes much. We waste a lot of time having a lot of conversations, and I would like to know if the manager knows what this increase is for. It's a simple answer, yes or no.
No, I'm calling now.
Okay, well then we can move forward and perhaps you could get back to us by the next budget hearing.
Right.
With all due respect, who seconded Councilmember Petros's motion?
It was
What
Ed
was that
London.
again?
Which motion?
It was
Alice
Ed London, the first
motion,
one.
I seconded it, and then Councilmember Petros made a friendly amendment. I guess I'll second the friendly amendment. How's that?
Thank you.
What was it? The motion to move the
Reduce
chamber and the foundation out?
Yes, correct. Move the foundation and the chamber out of the community
I
group.
seconded that. Yeah.
Can we vote on that now?
Yes, we're voting on it now. All those,
Just get that done.
Councilmember, let's vote on it.
Moving the chamber and the foundation, that motion?
Correct.
Yes.
Councilmember,
Are we including the funding or not? I'm sorry.
No, not including the
Moving
funding.
2020 funding. We're moving it to 2020 funding. If we need to find $8,600 next week or 2 weeks, if it's critical to their function, then we'll do so. If we need it, but let's move it along.
Other question.
Yeah, exactly. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay.
Motion
Okay.
carries.
All right. So,
Mayor,
yes.
just a quick thing. I asked at some point, and maybe we should do this motion now, to move the youth council up to community groups and out of advisory boards before we make any other motions on what we're doing in community groups.
It's weird. Youth council, you're right, because it's zeroed in community groups and it's in the advisory boards. I'll second that motion.
Yeah, and if I can add to that motion to reduce it to $5,000. Yeah.
I'll second that as well.
What's the motion, please?
The motion is move youth councils from advisory boards into community groups and reduce their funding from 10,000 to 5,000.
Okay.
All those in
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Let
Motion carries.
me just get the opportunity. Let me make sure people if they want to speak to one, I don't want to miss them.
Do we have a vision on this youth council, and is it an in-person thing? What is the plan here?
Probably could do Zoom.
Yeah, I think we're probably gonna have to do it kind of Zoom set up this year. So last year was very difficult when we got hit in March. Everybody was all over the place, so we couldn't.
So Councilmember Laredo has moved the active seniors at their 2020, and I seconded it. 34,000. Any discussion?
Sorry, may I have clarification, Mayor Davey?
Yes.
Can you please repeat that?
The active seniors on the Key Club as Councilmember Laredo has moved them to be included in the funds to be included in the COVID reserve fund.
No, to get them approved.
Well, to be
Yeah,
approved.
okay, I see what you mean.
Well,
Yeah.
right, no, but the seniors, that's
I hear-
really a different group. It's different than the 4, right? I mean, that's.
Right,
what-
they're ongoing, they're doing great online.
Right,
they're
so I think we
wonderful.
leave their funding in place.
Yeah, they're
Perfect.
doing a lot virtual.
In place.
They're doing great, they're doing great. We need to send out the message today
Agreed.
that we're supporting
And
them.
I think it should be noted that they did not seek an increase.
That's right.
Thank you, thank you.
Can I just ask a point of clarification? So you're moving these
We're approving them
organizations
individually.
moving them into this COVID reserve fund. And is it the intention of council that, because you're getting a 7-0 vote, just let me finish, Mayor. When these items come before the council again, it will likely be a different council. And are you anticipated then that you're going to be, the new council will vote on this again? So there will be a vote then?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that was the motion made by Councilmember Petros.
So then there's a risk that there may not be a 7-0 vote at that time.
There doesn't have to be a 7-0 vote. I don't believe we're
Well, it may be, Mayor, I think,
I'm sorry, I thought I
Mayor,
heard that
if there
Katie
may
say
be a
that
ruling.
this fund,
I want to save these funds today with the 7-0 before a ruling. I know you're saying I guess you made up your mind. I'm not sure that I agree with that judgment. I believe that it requires 7-0, and I'm trying to save those that have our support from further consideration. I want to discuss the educational board too. I want to save those today, not tomorrow, not the next day, and that's the intent of my motion. That's why this slush fund, COVID fund, gets me a little bit weary, because then it requires a second approval. And I think it should go forth from today that money is there. And by the way, these two groups.
What happens if a group goes 4-3?
They're so responsible. They're delivering something that they didn't ask for for an increase, and they did not use monies that they didn't need. So they are responsible people that if they don't use it, if they don't feel they can pull together again the July 4th, they're not going to spend it. I feel very confident with these two groups very easily. And that's what I'm trying to achieve. The legality is getting.
I'm sorry. So your vote was to keep the money in the 4th of July committee.
Period. Irrevocable. Yes. And also the Ask Club for senior citizens. And hopefully, we won't have a problem, but it's there. So they have the comfort going forward that their stuff is approved. There are other things that I have problems with.
Okay, understood. Councilmember McCormick?
I thought, my understanding from what Councilmember Petros said was that this money going in the fund was approved, and since the numbers are all below what the manager can approve, since we increased that, right? She can spend that money without it coming back for a vote unless there's a change, unless they're asking for more for some reason. Otherwise, I don't see the fund as a positive.
I agree. I don't know if I just wanted to move this along. I am fine with that, given that the money's.
But that needs to be voted on, and that needs to be decided. That this fund, we're approving it now, and the manager can disperse the funds as the requests come in, but that we're just reducing the numbers so that we don't have to put as much in the fund, keeping in mind that some of these events won't happen, although we're not sure which ones.
Right.
So rather than budgeting for all of them, we're budgeting for some, and whichever can happen are the ones that she'll spend the money on.
Let's do this right now, which is listen to the ones that Councilmember Laredo feels particularly strongly about. The Ask Committee was not one that I thought should go into the general fund, because I think we all think it's very valuable. So let's just take a vote on that and hear what are the other ones that he wants to highlight.
Councilmember Petros, I agree with you. Let's do this way. Councilmember Laredo, why don't you tell us which ones you want to pull out and have a vote on?
No, we're going to go. Okay, let me see if I'm trying to explain something. I am waiting for a legal opinion on the forms that they worked out with the manager and Mr. Segurola for the next meeting on the rest of them. I was trying perhaps to, in an effort to simplify the next meeting, complicated it. Even with that issue unresolved, I thought there's some that are so well regarded by me and I think all of us that they should not even be reconsidered again in 2 weeks' time. They should go home tonight knowing that we support them, that we respect them, and that we, first of all, appreciate the fact that they did not ask for an increase. And I do not want to have it in a way that then some other council will have to vote on it again. That's a simple way I look at it. Perhaps I complicated it. I don't have, because I have things to discuss on the other ones that we can do on the 20th, or we can do now. But if we don't have a ruling, I thought we would get a ruling on the section 7.025.
Section
but I guess
705.
05. That I thought we moved that that would be the manager and the village attorney will get together and those forms will come back to us.
Okay,
That's all. But
I
if you
think-
feel that we get to defer the whole thing.
Hold on, everybody hold on. Okay, understood. Councilmember Petros, you're recognized.
I think to move things along, and I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Laredo, I would say that I respect all these people that are doing things in our community, and I'm sure you do too. And I know some of these have been around longer than others, but we should always look at them, I think, objectively all the way down the list. And if for tonight, I think we've all agreed that we don't want to go higher than the adopted 2020s on funding. So let's find out which ones you would like us to take specific votes on, and then we can wait for the opinion, and at the next meeting, we can determine if we want to move some of these into a separate fund that allows flexibility and allows us to do a little bit more in savings, okay?
All right,
Vice
the
Mayor
ones that I
Ross?
have, the two that I mentioned, Village of Kindness, which is only 5,000. And that's it for now.
Not the Historical
the next
Society?
meeting. Village of Kindness, which is for
Vice Mayor Moss,
the,
you're recognized.
Sorry, Village of Kindness is one that you are not for because you think it needs a.
no, I
7-0
am
vote?
for. She asked me the three that I
Okay,
would
so,
like to
and I
approve
didn't
before.
take everything off as we went. So you believe it's 7-0 vote, you need an opinion for Historical Society, Youth Leadership, Piano Festival.
I'm not getting through, I'm sorry.
No,
I just wasn't clear which ones we'd done.
Okay,
It
why
was
don't we just go
approved.
from the top?
Guys,
Okay.
stop. Everybody just simmer down for a second. Councilmember, I think Councilmember Petros's point is, Councilmember Laredo's needs this opinion from the attorney. I think we have to vote on that next. You know, I don't think either go through each and every one of these and vote them up or down right now and say we're going to keep it in the community groups, or we wait until, I think we wait until next week agreeing that we want to keep them all at the 2020 level.
I say we go through them one by one now pending the legal opinion.
Okay?
But if we're going through them one by one now, is it that the only thing that stays is if we all vote 7-0 to keep
No,
them?
that's
That,
4-3.
okay,
It's 4-3.
okay.
These aren't, you know, I mean,
Well,
they can challenge
pending the legal opinion.
pending the legal opinion. If the legal opinion comes back that yes, we need a 7-0 vote, then
to revote.
we vote them. So, all right, let's call them Village of Kindness.
I
Move.
move.
Second, discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
Wait, I'm against.
You're against the Village of
Yes.
Kindness. Okay, we have
Correct.
6-1 on the Village of Kindness. Historical Society, I move it.
Move. Second.
Discussion.
I think that one should be reduced, given that we don't know where that one's gonna go. That should go into the pot.
Yeah,
What do you
and
mean you don't know where it goes?
Katie asked a question that.
The question is whether we're gonna keep it or we're gonna move it. We're at 2020 adopted.
Right, but Katie asked a question in the first meeting of Mr. Kaplan, and why is the $10,000 appears again as a museum setup, which has already been set up? And his answer was a pretty good non-answer. So.
Well, I think I can speak about this a little bit, which is, We could, I believe we could reduce this a certain amount. They are still paying rent. And because of COVID, they weren't able to go in and actually move their stuff out of there. They've been working, I think, with the manager and have found a space that they could move the historical artifacts to as soon as it's safe to do so. So once they do that, they can get out of their rental payment. Is that true, Andrea?
So I moved $5,000.
Yeah, before COVID, we spoke about, there's space and I'll speak with the clerk's office because she wasn't here yet, but there's some space in that area, and then there's space around my office as well. So we thought we could accommodate them.
Kitty, you have a number? I threw out
Know what they
5,000.
pay in rent? So we could estimate what their cost might be?
I'm
Clearly, they
sure
won't
we
need the
have
whole
it.
amount.
But what you asked, if you forgot what you asked why is it a double charge for the exhibition? And the answer was, so I would take up, which is $10,000. So I would take up $10,000 and leave $5,000, which is enough to cover the rent.
I second that.
I'm sorry, you're moving it to $10,000?
No, $5,000. Eliminate
Okay,
the $10,000.
Councilmember, how much rent does that cover?
How much rent does that cover?
Well, they asked
It covers
for
the
10.
rent.
They asked for 10 for the exhibition. And the question was asked, well, if the exhibition's already there, why are you gonna have another 10,000 for the exhibition, which is already physically there? And that is the one that I'm trying to move out.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there any discussion on the motion for 5,000?
I do know that they did a video with Dr. Paul George, and I'm not sure that's been paid for yet or not. So to be safe, can we keep it at 10,000?
We don't know when they can move.
That's
so we
right.
don't know when
we
the
don't
rent
have
is
enough-
going to be paid. And if they do move partial, like halfway or in 3 months, we won't extend it, right? It will come in less.
Could we ask for the manager to find this information out for our next meeting instead of us trying to guess what their rent is, how many months they need, what they
Thank
paid
you.
for, what they haven't paid for? We all are in agreement that 15 seems like it's too big of an ask for this year, but we have another budget hearing. Why don't we just get the answer and move to the next one?
So I have the answer if you'd
Okay.
like. So based on what I have from the community group workshop, I had supplies, materials, and equipment, 1,000, interviews and documentaries, 2,000, events, 2,000. Preservation and storage was reduced from 5,000 to 0. So that might be the rent. And then the pop-up museum was 10,000.
That's my point.
Okay.
In their budget presentation, which I have here from that hearing.
What was
they
the
put
total,
up-
manager?
It was a
15,000.
total
Okay,
15,000, of which 10,000 was for the pop-up exhibition, which cannot be popped up twice. That's why my arrival at 5,000.
So I think we can do the 5,000, and then if we find out that there's something else, we can add it back, just like you said before.
Fine.
I would say defer. Why don't we defer it to the next?
yeah, I'd rather
we need to
defer
find
and hear
out.
from them before we give up. They've done a video. This is an important part of our community, and it's 15,000. I think I'd rather wait until the next meeting to cut them down. But there's a motion on the floor. Let's hear the motion.
For 15,000.
Yep, to 5,000, you said, so.
No, for 5,000, I'm sorry.
For 5,000, so the motion's
Call
on
the
the
question.
floor.
I'd be happy to withdraw it if you want.
I'd like to
And
withdraw it, but it's your
reconsider it
motion.
next time.
What's that?
I'd be happy to withdraw the motion
Okay, the motion
if
is
we're gonna
withdrawn. We'll do it.
review it
next
in the
week. 2
next
weeks.
meeting on the 28th, which also we will have the 7-0 ruling.
Right.
That would make more sense.
Well, I
So I withdraw the
respectfully,
motion.
okay, fair enough. So let's move to the next one. Youth leadership at 17,000, I'll move it. So
Do we know what it's for?
Second.
I believe this is the youth lead change.
right,
Which is what exactly?
that's the Outward Bound programming. It's helping.
And they sponsor, you may recall, we had full presentations about Peace First and the Outward Bound coming together in the village, and they sponsor youth-led social entrepreneurship projects in the village by village children or teens.
If I remember correctly, that also included kids from outside the village from Mast and the funding.
Yeah, Mass, that's right, they go to our school.
So we funded non-Key Biscayne kids by funding this.
I'm not sure you can
I'm not
know
sure
one way
about-
or the other, frankly.
I think what you're
Well-
talking about were assemblies,
Right.
not the social entrepreneurship projects that were run through the community center.
And I'm also wondering if this is a 7-0 vote, because I
Why
don't
is it a
see any,
7-0 vote?
because aside from being charitable to individuals offsetting their costs to take trips, what is the village getting in return?
Okay, I have her ask right in front of me, and I do remember last year, Ignacio, that she had two parts to it, and one of it was outward bound trips, and we decided not to fund that for some of the reasons that you're saying.
Right.
So this budget goes towards workshops, which is budgeted at 7,500 this year. So we could, obviously it's gonna be tough to do workshops. I don't know if online things, what the expense are. Events, we're listed at 3,000, speakers at 1,500, interviews and documentaries at 4,500, and then the website at 1,500, which was 18,000 for the 2020 proposal.
I
Talking about bringing it down to 17,000.
Right.
I think, given the fact that this is one of those things that gets put in the pot of what events can take place, pending the 7-0 opinion.
And you're saying that this should be put into the, if we do a pandemic
A pot.
response fund,
Right.
that it would go down there. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
because
Okay.
we don't know
I
what
do
events
think
are
they
going to take
have some
place.
virtual programming already planned. But to Ignacio's point, there clearly are things that they won't be able to do if you can't meet in person. I do think it's important to notice, and Ignacio, you may or may not recall this. I don't know if you were on council at the time. Both this organization and the Kindness in the Schools initiative, the Village of Kindness, came basically from discussions from the community and from the council, noticing a need in our community with our own youth and children. And these were developed in direct response to needs that were identified from the dais. So while I understand that you feel this is a charitable organization, it was developed specifically in an attempt to address needs that we saw within our community of behavioral or different types of issues.
Well, I see it more as it was done to address wants than needs. And again, I think we need the legal opinion because this rides the line between
If by wants,
charitable
you're
or not.
talking about like, some of the things we had seen with behaviors outside of CVS and other issues with vandalism and so forth.
Yes.
I suppose those wants from the rest of the community, absolutely.
Yes,
But for
and-
some
and
of them,
there-
they saw them as needs.
Correct.
Being
And
able to
there are a
go
lot
to
of
the
other
golf
wants in the
cart without-
community that aren't, there are a lot of other wants in the community that are not getting funded. And just because somebody wants something doesn't mean we use public funds for it. That's why we need the legal determination, whether or not it's a 7.05 charitable donation or not.
Okay, noted. Any more discussion on this? Let's vote. Go ahead. No, the Vice Mayor, if you have a comment, please, let's get going though.
I just want to say that I think that, our village has certain initiatives that we are looking for. We look at culture, we look at education, we look at community. And this is not just because somebody has an idea. I mean, we want to make sure that these types of things are here for the quality of life for the people who live here. And I think it's better to have community people who put this together than go out and hire some company who wants to put on something. I mean, the communities are, these groups are much cheaper to put these types of things forward for our community to increase the quality of life. It's volunteers. They need some money to help put this stuff together. And they're giving us a service in response to it. So, I just don't see these as like these grants, charitable contribution. I know, our council is going to come back with it, but again, we're digging into the wrong area. I mean, this really gives a lot of quality. People live here because of our community and involvement, and we need to be supportive of it. But I think it's our initiatives, not their initiatives coming to us and say, hey, I have an idea, let's do this. No, our initiative saying that we want to have this type of event, and they're willing to put their time and do it, and we should support it. So I just find this whole hour almost, getting to a waste of time at some point. I mean, I get some of the small areas that we want to look at, but let's just move on. I mean, I think it's getting a little bit ridiculous.
Can I just add, I agree with Brett, but I just had another thought about this particular item that I think may make Councilmember Segurola feel good. I think Councilmember Laredo would certainly like it, because I know he feels like these organizations need to be taking village money sort of as seed money and moving on. This particular one does have additional private donor funding, if I recall that correctly. I know it's been a while since we had our workshop on these, but it is not even entirely village funded.
Madam Manager, before the next meeting, could you recirculate the forms that the groups filled out?
Yes, sir. And I would also like to point out, in fairness to the village attorney's office, I found out from staff a few moments ago that we had not provided those forms, to my knowledge, to the attorney. So.
Okay. I guess if
Okay, there's a vote on the table. We have a motion out.
By the way, to McCormick's point, yeah, just so that we talk about a strategic vision and planning on our June 17th meeting, and it's probably not referred to minutes, and I have my notes. We made two policy decisions on this area. One, that we would look forward to it being seed money, i.e. venture capital. And two, that these groups that we fund should have and start working on an exit strategy so that they don't become entirely dependent. And three, that we would recognize some that have, quote, historical value, that did not have to live by one or two. And that is why I moved the other ones, because those are my notes of the decisions we made back in June 17th.
Excellent. All right. All those in favor of youth leadership? Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
Okay, whatever.
Next, Key Biscayne Piano Festival, $29,500. And I would say, because this is an event that's going to be impacted by COVID, this money would be, if we approved it, moving into the COVID emergency reserve, COVID reserve. Discussion. I think it's a worthwhile program. I think it's, hopefully it can come back. I do understand they can't have them in place right now, so I understand that. But I would like to have the money there if we have the opportunity to bring some culture back to the Key. So I'll move it.
I'll second it. I think it's an initiative that could bring great value long-term to our island also.
Agreed. Discussion, anybody?
I'm confused, my mayor, forgive me. This is, I know, taking a lot of time. Katie, I thought you said that you made a motion and a policy decision that everything will be funded at the 2020 level. Now you're going up with an increase of.
No, that is the 2020 level, Councilmember Laredo.
Is the 2020 level.
Which is 29,500.
Yes, that's what I said.
I'm sorry, I thought you said 40 something.
No.
And we've already approved that we always are going to keep the 2020 amount, right?
Right.
Yes.
It's always on the 2020.
That's how I have it on my notes here.
I might have heard you say 40 something.
I did not say 40. You couldn't.
I wouldn't do that to you.
So anyway, all right. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, Key Biscayne Car Week, again, another event that if it's approved, the money would go into the COVID reserve. I think it's got some potential. I really do.
At 20,000, right?
20,000,
Yes.
correct. It's 2020 level. So I move it.
Second.
Okay, discussion. I think it can bring some real benefits economically to the, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, next item is, they're calling it Zero Waste Culture, but it's really Key Biscayne Composting, I believe is the official name of it. They were at 13,805. I did some work. They set up a station down in the park, but they're collecting here on the key. I'll move it.
No, hold on.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion.
The reason I have a problem with this is because they are called a Zero Waste Culture, Inc. They are a corporation which is based in Brickell. It is not based on Key Biscayne. 2 out of the 3 directors live in the city of Miami, not in Key Biscayne. I don't think this is something that we should be funding.
Their project is intended to help us with the composting. Here on
Their project could be.
I think it's a
intended to help
not-for-profit.
anyone.
I'd have to
It
look it
is
up.
a not-for-profit.
It is a not-for-profit, but it could be intended to, it could help anyone. And if they're not based on Key Biscayne, why are we giving money to companies not based on Key Biscayne?
But they're doing work here on Key Biscayne. Their intent is for this community.
Well, they can do, they're doing work in more than one location.
Well,
And
they
just
may
because
be.
they're,
I don't believe they are, but I think, where did you get that? Where else are they doing work?
I'm looking at their website where it's their programs. You'd have to look at their website, but if they're not,
But you're
based
looking
on,
at their website. What are you seeing?
What does it say?
it says, actually, it doesn't say a whole lot, actually.
Can we ask you to come
I
back?
thought you saw it.
Okay. I am. It doesn't say a whole lot.
Where do you get that they're doing work off the key?
Because they're based off Key Biscayne. Their address is 150 Southeast 25th Road.
Right, that's somebody's house.
Well, that's where the corporation, the registered agent, where they're based out of.
But
they're not based on Key Biscayne. So the precedent is if a corporation is based off of Key Biscayne, but they do some work in Key Biscayne, they can come and ask the council for money.
If the work that they're
Not for the
doing,
council to fund the project off the key. This money is for the work on
project
the
that
key.
we're doing here on the
And
key.
how do you know that? How do
We
you
pay
know that this is for
SFM.
money?
They're not based on the key. But
No,
we
but
pay
they're
them
doing
to
work
do the
on
work
Key
on the
Biscayne,
key.
and they're a vendor. They're not a charitable donation. This
isn't a charitable
This
donation.
isn't a
They're
charitable
providing-
donation. It's a
Yes,
fee
it-
for service.
They're providing a service.
Call the
To
question.
whom?
He's not going to change his mind. Let's move to the
I'm not
next
going to
one.
change my mind.
So you're
because it
no.
is clear.
Let's move to the next one.
All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, 6-1.
Motion carries.
All right. Trap and release program at 15,000. I move that.
I second it too. I think it's very important for our community to
Yes,
continue
agreed.
that.
I think they've done a great job. Okay, all the, discussion? Trap, neuter, and release.
All those in favor?
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
Okay.
Motion carries.
City Theater. City Theater at 15,000. That's a local production company. I'll move it.
That's one that's going to be in the reserve, right, that you said?
In the fund?
Yes, I believe so. Yes, because I don't think they can do productions online. So we'll put that in 15,000. And all those in favor?
Is there a
Aye.
second? I didn't hear a second.
I'll second
Second.
it.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. Art Festival, well, now we have the K-8 senior volunteers. I'm not sure what that was about this year.
I think they told us it was like for their luncheon and different things that they do for the seniors themselves. And this, I think, also should maybe be in the fund. I don't know, or maybe we should wait and see if we can hear from them. I don't know if
Could
anyone's
that-
spoken to Betty to see if they're doing anything virtually.
And I guess the other question on that, this would be a new thing, obviously, which.
Right. What's that?
It could live either in the Ask Committee, and maybe it did. Like, where was it
No,
before?
it didn't. I don't know how they funded it in the past, where it was, but it's definitely,
No,
it's
it's
a
the
different
K-8
organization.
seniors. It used to be,
It was Lois
it
Greenberg
was
and
the
Betty.
council,
and
wasn't it?
Maybe.
I think it might have been in the manager contingency where the sponsorships were.
Right. Let's find $1,000 that gives,
Yeah.
you know, it's Betty, it's a bunch of people who put time in the school, you know, we can help them.
What are we funding? I don't understand what we're funding.
She had asked for it. They do a luncheon for the seniors, I think twice a year. This could be in the fund because obviously they're not going to be getting together, but they do tremendous work. It's $1,000. I mean, in my opinion, it is money way more than well spent.
Right. I agree with you.
And who moved it?
I move it.
And who seconded it? Thank you.
Allison, second. Discussion.
I mean, I will say now we're moving something over from 2021, which goes against what we were saying of funding at the 2020 level.
Well, I didn't realize, I thought it was in the same, I thought it was.
Maybe that's not true. If it's moved from somewhere else in the budget, how much was it last year to the manager?
I think either this.
Never existed, I don't think.
No, it
was funded from us.
Contingency, and I think it was at the same level.
Okay, fair enough. So then what it should look like is that in 2020, it was 1,000.
Right, somewhere.
Yes.
So. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion carries.
Great. Art Festival, 4th of July picnic at $4,000, moved.
Second.
Discussion.
This is for the fund, yes?
Yes, this would be in the fund. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that's it, because the Cape Beach Business Fair, it's not, you know, I would like to say if they do come back, if we're fortunate enough that it can move forward, able to open up in the spring, I would love to see it come back. It was a great event. I don't know if you've been there the past 2 years, but the parents have done a lot of work on it. The kids get super excited. They get really motivated. Frankly, it teaches some of the economic skills we don't really learn in school. So it teaches some good lessons valuable to the children. So it gives us a value in the community. So I'm hoping that when they do come back, they're able to, we can fund it at that time. But that concludes the community groups.
I think can I just make a point about this one that it has always been zero?
I need to be able to see everybody.
Oh, yes, sir.
It has always been at zero. And the reason, if you recall, when they presented, it was that they've always sought their own sponsorship from local businesses. Right. And the request to the village was really more of a relief to the local businesses than to the actual event, because they felt that the businesses weren't going to be able to offer the same sponsorship as readily as they did.
I would encourage them that if they are able to put something together this year, I would love to see them come forward and we'll talk. Vice Mayor Moss, and then I think Councilmember Laredo, you had your hand up as well.
No, I think that we need to look at this group of people and volunteers and organizations as more as initiatives. And I think we need to think of it like that. What is the stuff that we want to achieve? And some of these are, I think almost all of them are giving us something to achieve an initiative. So I would like to make a motion if we can change this from community groups as the top headline to community initiatives. And that way we can think about it in a different way, that we're not funding groups, we're funding initiatives, and these groups are helping us achieve those. So my motion on the table would be change it from community groups to community initiatives.
Moved or seconded. Discussion?
That doesn't change the fact that it still requires a legal opinion from our attorney, whether or not it's a charitable donation.
That's fine.
And I disagree. This is, some are initiatives, some are not. But I'm looking forward to the written attorneys. Exactly.
I'm against it. Mayor, and also I think we need to
understood.
leave some of these things for the next council and may at least have one new member. I think we keep, you know, I think it's premature. I see the sense of it, but we're all working on the same page. It would not be fair to the next council.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
No.
Okay, so who's opposed? Raise your hand, please, just so I can see you. So we have 3 opposed. We're to Ed and Allison, please turn on your camera so I can see if you're opposed or for. Councilmember,
I think we have so much confusion going on right now.
I know, it's incredible. We keep bringing things up to make more divisions, more. Jesus.
So motion carries on the last one. With all due respect, I have a question to the original motion for moving particular groups, the Piano Festival, Car Week, 4th of July. I don't remember a particular vote on that one. Going back to that.
I think we created that. Okay, well, let's have the vote. Do we agree to move do we agree to the creation of the COVID reserve fund? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Youth council wasn't voted on.
So all that stuff over there should probably go in here.
Let's talk about the youth council. I thought it was voted on. I apologize. I thought you voted on it at 5,000.
I think we just voted to move it, and I guess we did. We said move it and move it to
Reduce it to 5,000. It's a community group.
Okay.
We moved it at 5,000.
All right.
Okay.
And then to be clear on moving to the fund, I don't think there was a second, Mike. So it was just, but we got the message. It was a
Okay.
consensus of the council.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next item, I'm just gonna go down the list. Councilmember Segarola brought up, travel for the council. Again, my recommendation, maybe we put that in the reserve fund. Look, if we have the opportunity to go to Washington or Jacksonville or Tallahassee, you know, as Councilmember Laredo has said, we need to be in their faces on things. And there's a lot of big things that we have coming up that I'd like to see us all getting up there and meeting with these people when it's possible in the next fiscal year. Now, first quarter may not be feasible, but it may be feasible in the second quarter. So I'd like us with some leeway to get up there. So
It was not from the council. I thought he was talking about staff, right?
No, I think he was talking about our travel as well. Correct, Councilmember Segarola? That's the note I have.
Yes,
Yeah.
our travel is listed as 11,300.
Right.
And I propose cutting that.
Right, and my thinking was, you know, again, if you want to put it in the reserve fund, but I would like to have it available to us if we do need to go to these different places. Councilmember Petros, you recognized?
If you're gonna do a reserve fund for travel, I recommend that it be separate than the reserve fund for the community groups, so that you delineate where this flexibility is. I think it's too confusing to lump everything into one big reserve fund.
That's fine. I mean, I think, my thinking is leave it in the budget. I mean, we're not going to use it if we can't travel.
Okay.
Spend money on travel we can't do on the behalf of the council. I just would like to.
I think we can, sorry. I think sorry, Mike, were you done?
No, I'm done.
I think we can leave it, but I think we should, you know, maybe lower the amount if we think it's going to be only a portion of the year.
Okay, I would agree to lower it to 9,000. That takes about a quarter off it. But I think we don't know when we're going to be able to travel.
I second it, Mayor.
Until Wednesday.
That's fine.
I second
To be
it's
consistent,
9,000.
Mike, to be consistent, which is exactly what you did, you landed right where the village landed when they were planning, which is to reduce things by 25% where it made sense.
Right, I think that makes sense. Let's go through the first quarter and look, if we have to adjust the budget later, that's fine. All right, discussion? All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay.
The library.
Placeholder. Councilmember Petros, did you want to speak to this? Councilmember?
Yes,
Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't know, as far as the library, there is no line item in the CIP for this year for the library, and we don't know what's gonna happen. I think as a community, we have established that we very much want an updated library. This happens to be something I feel really strongly about. I think our community's underserved by our public library, and I would ask that you just not change it right now because it has no impact on the budget this year. And if something changes next year, then you can choose to move the 21-22 budget accordingly.
Move to keep it.
No, I don't, just leave it. I mean, if there's no move to move it, don't make a move. All right. Does anybody?
Are you okay with that?
Okay, let's say we do keep it. Let's say one of two things is going to happen legally with the library. Either the county is going to get their way or the county is not in the next year. Now, if the county does not get their way, then we have a $1 million, plug here that we can use to make up for other things or reduce the budget. If the county does get their way, then we're looking at a library that's still part of the county library system. And what is it exactly that Key Biscayne is supposed to do to contribute to this, taking into account that, again, we'd be improving someone else's property? That's the problem that I have. We apparently are on this habit of improving other people's things. We're painting the bike lanes even though we don't own Crandon. Now we're gonna, I mean, I understand the philosophy behind improving the library available to our citizens, but are we going to be giving the county $1 million to go forth with whatever plan they're thinking about if they're somehow, victorious in their legal proceeding? And then we've given them $1 million, but it's still not our library. So that's how I see it. That's the problem I have.
Okay, Councilmember Petros, you can respond.
Okay, I would say that I don't necessarily agree with you that there's no value to our community when we contribute funds. And I think a lot of times we have additional things that we would like to add that may go above and beyond what the county would be providing our community. And for example, the Historical Society that I do think is really important, and it could live in the public library, and we could be putting our artifacts there, and we could want something in addition above and beyond what the county has earmarked for us. And I think that we should have flexibility because we benefit when we provide the best options possible to our community. And it isn't impacting this year's budget at all. So why take away that flexibility?
I see your point. I see your point about taking away the flexibility, and you do have a good point on that. I agree with you that if you take it away, then later you got to come up with it somehow down the road. But
why don't we do it as a courtesy?
Councilmember Laredo.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had stopped.
But going back to, I do see some value to, I don't think, period, there is never any value to improving something, even though we don't, contributing, even though we don't own it. The problem is, what are we going to get back for it? And from what I've seen historically, we get nothing or next to nothing back, specifically with regard to the county library. If they're going to do something, they're going to do something with the building. They're going to have the funds. They're the county. Their budget is 1,000 times larger than ours. And the county is not, if there's one thing I've realized about the county library system, is that they're not in the library business, they're in the real estate business. Because given the amount of property that they own and control all over the county, they are more than ready to do whatever it is that they want on any library property without the input of any municipality where that property could be located. So it begs the question for me, what are we gonna get in return for the $1 million? And to this day, if the library came back and said, we would be willing to give you X, Y, and Z in return for $1 million, whether we had input into the design because it's something specific that our residents want or something of the sort, then maybe I would consider it. But my concern is we're holding a bucket with $1 million in it, and there's nothing. We haven't even been hinted at that we're going to have any input or any say or anything specific.
That's not accurate. Vice Mayor Moss and then Councilmember Laredo.
You're saying the fact that this hasn't been impact in this year's budget. I mean, this is for a future discussion that we can have down the road. I mean, we're talking big topics, ideas of what this is going to be. I think we should just focus on this budget and move on to other items that are going to impact this year's budget.
I couldn't hear you.
Vice Mayor?
Segurola, I agree with some of your points. But this is probably not the time to discuss the merits. I think it's carrying it forward at least leaves up the opportunity to work on your concerns. And also, I feel very strongly that it's a legacy to a lot of hours of work that Councilwoman Petros has put into this thing. And so I agree. Hopefully I disagree agreeably with you, and I like to leave it there for another year. I think it has a symbolic and a colleague support, the value that transcends your concerns. So I would second it and call the question to leave it.
Second what motion?
Requested.
Well, no, I don't think we need a motion to leave
okay.
it alone. It's left. It doesn't need to move. That's the whole point.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Segurola, are you going to make a motion?
Nope.
Okay. Next item you brought up was the bike lanes.
Yes.
Your position, where you've been very clear. Is there a motion?
I move that we defund the painting of the bike lanes.
Okay. Is there a second? Okay.
I second it.
Discussion? I very much favor the bike lanes, so let's call the vote. All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Of removing the bike lanes funding.
200,000.
Should I do a roll call?
Yeah, you may as well.
Councilmember Petros?
No.
Councilmember Segurola?
Wait, yes is to defund?
Correct.
Okay, yes, I vote to defund.
Mayor Davey?
No.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London?
Councilmember London?
Seems to have stepped away.
Okay.
All
Move
right.
on.
Councilmember McCormick?
No.
Vice Mayor Moss?
No.
Motion failed.
Okay. Urban planner.
Similarly, I move to defund the urban planner.
Not the urban planner, but the 2040.
The city planner.
Consultant.
The consultant for the 20.
For the vision plan of 2040.
You second the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Discussion? Okay, let's call the roll call.
Councilmember Segurola?
Yes.
Mayor Davey? Sorry?
No.
Thank you. Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London? Councilmember McCormick?
No.
Vice Mayor Moss?
Can I ask a quick question before I vote on this? This is not in this year's budget. I can't find it.
Oh.
How are we
Just
defunding
vote
it?
no,
not.
Vice Mayor.
It's not in this year's budget? I thought it was in this year's budget.
No, it's not.
Okay, we'll vote on it. I mean, it's like I guess it's the library, but
No,
finish it up. Right, it wasn't in the budget anyway.
Okay, I thought I had seen it.
no,
So, Vice Mayor Moss, your vote is no?
no.
Councilmember Petros?
No.
Motion fails.
All right, pandemic response fund, I want to make sure if anybody, okay.
I'd like to move, Mayor, that we eliminate the Tallahassee lobbies expense. I have not been able to get an answer about any specific. They're wonderful people. They're very talented, some of whom I know. And yet we are blessed with very little on our part to have a state senator and a state legislator who manages on their own to get us real money. And so as we're all cutting back, I think I would like to cut that contract out. I know that we cut the local.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. I would just say that
It's a tough one, but.
It's a tough one. I just feel like the way we're looking at trying to get money up there, I think the more dogs we have hunting for us up there, the better off we are. So respectfully, while I understand the sentiment, I think it's, you know, I've been impressed with the people I've met that do the work, but I would be a no. But Councilmember McCormick, you're recognized.
I also would like to commend the sentiment. I felt very strongly about eliminating the local lobbyist. I didn't see the need for that at all, and I pushed for that for a while. I would love to see us get more out of our Tallahassee lobbyist, and I think that going through the exercise of putting out an RFP and looking into different lobbyists, and I think I would encourage the council to be really involved in that process, because ultimately it's the council who employs and contracts this lobbyist, not the manager. So I think it's important, and I think with the issues we're looking at with the beach, we do need to keep that. But I agree with you. I want us to be getting more out of our Tallahassee lobbyists, and I wouldn't vote to eliminate it just now, but I would ask that all of us play a very active role when that RFP goes out and the solicitations come in, that we make sure that we're picking someone who really is going to fight for us and is going to pay for themselves and more.
Councilmember Petros, I saw your hand up.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the lobbying that's happening for the beach is at the federal level, not at the state level, correct?
Sorry, what I meant by the beach was the example of the grant we have right now for our short-term fund, beach nourishment sort of Band-Aid project, as we call them. And with the uncertainty of the federal beach project, and we need to keep our options open. One, we don't know if we're going to get in or not. Two, we don't know when we would get in and start getting money. And those Band-Aid projects are really expensive for a community like Key Biscayne. And when we can get state dollars to help us put that sand on the beach and keep the shoreline that we do have, we really need them. So that's what I was talking about with the beach. But yes, you're right. When it comes to the Federal Shoreline Protection Program, it is the other team that we have assembled at the federal level.
Can I make a suggestion, Mayor? Sorry. Last point, maybe we could have the manager come back and tell us, at least for next year, specifically what we would be looking to get done at the state level, and maybe she could have a like it could be reduced potentially if there aren't a lot of things, because I think you can plan a year ahead for this. And I personally can't think of any specific things that are going on at the state level, but I wouldn't know.
Well, I'll tell you, and if I could jump in, having spoken to our senator and our representative over the past week, one thing that seems to be the rumblings in Tallahassee, now we all know how Tallahassee can go, but one of the rumblings is that things like stormwater, the bay, infrastructure work, it's going to be, I guess they'll call it Infrastructure Week up there in Tallahassee next year. But it seems that we may have an opportunity to get some funding for some of these projects that we want to push forward with. So that would be why I would oppose the move against a lobbyist, that I would support continuing to have a lobbyist up there.
But you know, Mayor, that is
I agree with Councilmember McCormick that we need to be very watchful and make sure that we're getting our value out of whomever we are sending, we're having help us up in Tallahassee, because it has to be us. We have to appear, we have to show, and we've worked, but we need to make it happen. Councilmember Laredo?
I mean, for the reasons that you just stated, is precisely why I want to eliminate them, because we have to make cuts. You spoke, we are blessed, I said earlier, by a very connected and close to us state senator and a representative who has gotten us all, capital ALL, the money that we have received. It has not come. I've been here close to 2 years. I've asked, is there any one thing that we've gotten? And the answer is no. And so precisely because our contact, your conversations, they will make the appointment. They are the ones who work behind the scenes on the budget. We are strongly represented. We're lucky to be strongly represented by people who actually vote and wheel and deal on our behalf. And the proof of the pie, which is what I usually govern my life by, is that they delivered. They have delivered and it's $10,000 here, $15,000, we have to cut somewhere. And with your conversations with them, and hopefully we will be able to, each one of us, we talk get more engaged. Tallahassee, I don't believe we need as much help because our circumstances that to be blessed with two guys, so hopefully we'll stay there for a while because they've been actually very proactive on our behalf.
No
They've
question.
actually
I agree
identified,
100%.
and I haven't seen anything. I'm trying to be fair because I know they're professional. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen any flagging. Something's coming down, and or I haven't seen any results. I have not seen a check, a funding, and that's why as I'm trying. All cuts are going to be painful. These are what I consider, I'd rather cut here than in community groups, and that's why I'm moving in the direction of reducing costs. So this will be an easy one for me, but
Councilmember,
that's the spirit of
I
what
just would like to add that there are many municipalities with strong lobbying efforts that when managed well, it's very profitable for the municipality. And I've literally asked for this RFP for a lobbyist. I think since my second year on council, we are at a point where we could make a change. And if we work our lobbyists and manage the relationship correctly, I believe that it could be profitable for us. I agree with you about our representatives. I think they're amazing. And I think we do a good job of reaching out to them. But I think that the addition of a strong lobbyist managed properly, we could take that relationship and really make it even more profitable. So my ask would be that we hold on a little bit longer and really work it and try to see if we can get to that point. I wouldn't want to be sort of penny wise, pound foolish kind of thing. I really believe that with the right lobbyist and the right management, we could be increasing what we're getting beyond what we're paying for our lobbyists.
Right. Has Councilmember Laredo's motion been seconded?
I think I did.
Petros, apologies. All right. Let's call the question. Roll call.
Okay. Mayor Davey?
What's the question?
Yeah, it's to defund.
Motion to defund the Tallahassee lobbying.
I'm going to say no at this time.
Okay. Mayor Davey was no? Okay.
No.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yes.
Councilmember London? Councilmember McCormick?
No.
What are you looking for?
Vice Mayor Moss?
I'm gonna vote no now, but I need to find out because I thought we were getting a lot of money from them for what the work they do. So, but I want to double check that.
Okay. Councilmember Petros?
Not at this time either. With more information hopefully to follow, I'm gonna follow up on that myself.
Councilmember Segurola?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay. And then I want to make sure I've gotten everybody's points. I think the last point was on the attorney. Now, Councilmember Petros had wanted to increase for labor. Councilmember London does not want to increase. In fact, he wanted to decrease for up to 1,000. Chad, if you could just speak to that for a minute. So,
I think from what I had spoken with Councilmember Petros earlier about this was that it was really to shift some of the funds from another line item into the labor, not increase the overall budget. I don't know if that's correct, Councilmember
Yes.
Petros. Okay.
Okay.
As far as the, as far as shifting those funds, if it's the will of the council, I don't have a issue with you moving some of those funds from, for example, litigation to labor. I don't anticipate us hopefully having a lot of litigation this year. And I don't see that being as an issue. As far as the undergrounding, I think Councilmember London had talked about the 50,000, I believe, in undergrounding.
Right.
I don't, I think that we may have a need for it. We have spent some time this year working on undergrounding. But if that's something that the council wants to remove, I won't object to that either.
You won't object?
So, no, I mean, if the council believes that we're not going to have any legal counsel services for undergrounding, I mean, you know, at this point, I think that it's been kind of up in the air, I guess. So
Right.
I can understand the concern. So if it's the will of the council to remove that 50,000, I could, you know, that's fine. I don't know unless the council believes there is going to be something that's going to happen. But I think that it seems to me that so far I haven't heard, you know, any direction of council to proceed on the undergrounding at this time. I guess it's up in the air. So.
But if we did get back into it and re-energize that project, we would obviously need your assistance.
Right.
Sure.
So, if
That's
you
fine.
wanted to, you know, it's a placeholder, I
Right.
guess.
Because if you don't do any undergrounding work, you don't get paid for it. We're not giving you 50
Right.
to cover that work. Right.
Right.
Okay. And you did, $240 worth of work as of June 30th. So, you know, I am for the project, obviously. I'd like to see us moving it forward. Where's Ed? Because this is Ed's motion.
Well, one of the things, Mike, that we discussed was with undergrounding was putting some pressure on FPL and
Right.
potentially getting them to look at us again and see if they would consider covering more of the project.
Right.
And that may involve legal
Attorneys.
counsel. So
Yeah.
I don't, you know, I wouldn't
All right, well, Ed's not.
defund that totally, let's put it that way.
Councilmember Segarola?
If I may, nothing
Sure.
else is going to happen on undergrounding until we finish our survey, which will be 6 months to a year. And then after that, we hand that over to FPL for a binding cost estimate. So aside from the survey, and Madam Manager, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there's absolutely anything that will happen on undergrounding in the next fiscal year.
But there's possibility of doing the work with FP&L that Councilmember Petros just mentioned.
There's no work that FPL can do until they get the survey.
There's pressure we could potentially.
No, there was some ideas of some legal things.
No,
to
they need a binding cost estimate, and then we can ask them for an offset to the total cost by what they would have put into the village in hardening. But you can't get that until you have a binding cost estimate.
I think
And
this
yes.
was more about pressure, given the legislative changes, Ignacio, that occurred last year, and the fact
Yeah.
that now they can spread some rate over. But what
Oh,
you're
no, no.
saying is the estimate has to come first before we can actually.
But it's not
Here.
even pressure. I don't even believe it's pressure. I think we are entitled to it, that they will offset the cost by whatever the Public Service Commission authorizes them to charge. They will decide how much they would have spent in Key Biscayne to harden. Let's say, just to give you a number, let's say it's 9 million. If once the binding cost estimate comes out, let's say it's 49 million, you subtract the 9 and our cost is 40. We get the credit for the hardening.
This
Yeah,
is
it's
different,
two
Ignacio.
separate
I think this
issues.
is different,
That's
and
two
I
separate
think
issues.
with Ed not
Yeah.
here, maybe we should just move this one to
Right.
our
This
next
could-
meeting.
That could be on the next meeting if
Let's
he wants to
not
bring a
do
motion.
anything on it.
That's fair
That's
enough. We'll
fine.
move on. Was there anything else that anybody wanted to bring up as a point? I think I got everybody's points. I hope I did. If I didn't get your point, please bring it up now. Okay. Is there anything further to discuss? Then, motion to adjourn.
Wait.
Hold on a second.
No.
We have to-
I'm
Sorry.
sorry.
Time
So
out.
for next,
We have to approve, sorry.
Wait.
sorry, for next meeting, we're gonna get the legal opinion. We're
Yeah,
also gonna get the,
I'll go through them for you. And then
we're also
council,
gonna
yes.
get the movement of the education committee out of, and bring it up for consideration.
Which,
The education committee to take it out of, did we not decide that, to take it out of community groups?
Yes, and
is
put it
in
into
community
advisory
group
boards.
In the most recent one.
it's not on the community
No,
groups.
There was a
Oh, I'm
motion by,
looking at an order that you, so it would since June if they moved out.
Still, yeah, it moved since June. All right, so we have to,
They're exempt, they're exempt from the 7-0 rule if it's ruled that way. 'Cause I
all
wanna
right, so
say-
I'm going to, so we got to go back to the ordinance. I'm sorry. We have to move the ordinance.
table the ordinance, go back, table the budget, go back to the millage.
Got
Move
it.
to table.
I move to table the ordinance.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Take the millage off the table.
Move. Second. I don't know if you moved.
Who moved?
I moved.
Second.
Thank you.
okay, I'm sorry, you can call the vote.
Now we'll
Roll
call the
call.
vote on the millage.
Wait,
Roll
do
call?
we have to recalculate it at all or no?
Yeah, we do, but wait, what, did you guys vote to move it off the table, the millage?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think now what we need is, I need to understand if Benjamin and Tom and Andrea, if you I know that the budget numbers have shifted around, so, it's, we haven't got to the millage, but presumably, has there been a decrease in the overall budget from what was discussed tonight?
So we are at 3.2079 with the changes that have been made tonight.
That's a drop of how much? 0.01 something?
Right, we were at 3.2164.
And now you're at what?
3.2079.
3.2079.
Chad, do
Okay,
you have the
And then-
statement that needs to be read?
I do, yes, but what is the percentage under the rollback rate then? If someone can give me that percentage.
Yeah.
Looks like 0.0702, is that right? No,
I got 0.003,
yeah,
0.335%.
Give us just,
Benjamin or Andrea?
yeah, just a minute, give us a minute. Okay, so the rollback rate is 3.2187. Right now, we are at 3.2079, which represents a 0.33. How many decimals do you need?
Just 2.
0.33 reduction from the rollback rate.
0.33, so it's 0.33%?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Under the rollback rate.
Correct.
Okay. So let me just read the statement then. The rollback rate is 3.2187 mils and the proposed millage rate is 3.2079 mils, which is 0.33% under the rollback rate. The final virtual public hearing to adopt the millage rate and the budget for the fiscal year commencing October 1st, 2020 through September 30th, 2021 be and is hereby set as a virtual council meeting on Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020 at 6 p.m. So, Mayor and Council, that's the resolution before you is to approve a millage, a tentative millage at 3.2079.
Move.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? Any opposed?
Nope.
Motion carries.
Okay. We'll,
Okay.
your ordinance from the table.
Move.
I moved it.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor, roll call?
Roll call, Councilmember London. Councilmember McCormick.
I'm sorry that I took a break for a second. We're voting on the
Budget
Ordinance.
ordinance. Yes.
Well, this is just to move it off the table, correct?
Oh, okay. This is-
Oh.
I'm sorry, then it could have been a voice. vote.
Then I'm a definite yes.
Yes,
So all those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, now,
As amended.
for the record, Andrea, you may want to say what the actual budget is now, if you have that number.
Yes. Okay, so the bottom line is 34,178,000.
Yeah, and that's
Or 98?
transfers out.
34,198,
No, 7.
178,619. 190, I'm sorry, give 34,197,619.
How much less is that from last year's approved budget?
So last year's adopted budget, we were at 36,337,651.
Okay, it's been seconded.
Who moved it?
I moved it.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
All, okay, roll call?
All right. Councilmember McCormick,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Moss,
Yes.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Councilmember Segurola,
Yes.
Mayor Davy,
Yes.
Councilmember Laredo,
You need to unmute yourself, Councilmember. Councilmember Laredo?
Sorry, yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Councilmember London,
Sorry, I just I came in from walking the dog. What are we voting on?
The budget.
No.
Increase your salary. Can you increase?
You know what? He was gonna do that regardless of whether.
What if the council was gonna get a salary? What do you mean?
Don't even make
We're
that.
giving you, we're hiring you as a consultant.
We don't deserve it.
Yeah. You don't
We
make,
need you as a consultant.
looks nice and warm out there in Colorado, Ed.
There's snow on the ground, about 4 or 6 inches of snow.
All right.
The dog had to go.
That's it? Motion to adjourn?
Second.
If I may, Mayor, really quickly, just so we're all clear on kind of next steps and timeline. I've taken as good note of good of notes as I can, and I'll work with the clerk's office and the attorney's office to make sure that we reconcile all of our points. In order to be able to produce the agenda and get it to everybody in a timely manner, I would need to deliver the documentation to the clerk's office on Monday, the 14th. So the clerk can produce the documents on Tuesday, the 15th, which we then could overnight a package to anybody who's out of town to arrive at your place, wherever you are, by Wednesday, the 16th. So I would kindly ask so that I can work over, the weekend on this. If any council members have any specific asks, want to dive deeper into anything, other ideas that came up that didn't come up at this hearing, if you kindly would, and I'll reach out to all of you as well, but if you could kindly let me know so we could include that feedback so that we can meet the turnaround time and get you the documentation timely. I'd appreciate it.
And the second reading of the budget ordinance will take place on September 22nd at 6 p.m.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you all Thursday night. Have a good one.
Thanks.